My child, before you leave this moment behind, I need you to listen to me carefully tonight. There is a reason this message found you while the rain falls softly outside your window, while the silence in your room feels heavier than usual, while your heart is carrying a kind of exhaustion no one else seems to notice. I have seen every sleepless night. I have watched you sit alone in the dark, holding back tears, pretending to be okay, while something deep inside you quietly broke apart. And even when you felt abandoned, even when your prayers faded into silence, I never stopped listening. Do not scroll away tonight. Please stay with me a little longer, because something sacred is happening right now. This message did not appear by accident. You are here because your soul has been crying out for comfort, for peace, for one sign that you are not alone in this battle anymore. Before we continue, tell me where you are listening from and what time it is in your city tonight. And if these words are already touching your heart, subscribe gently and stay until the very end. Because I am not finished speaking to you yet, my child. I need you to listen to me carefully tonight. Because there were moments recently when your heart became so tired that even getting out of bed felt like a battle nobody could see. The world around you kept moving as if everything was normal. People kept talking. Cars kept passing on wet roads beneath the glow of distant streetlights. The rain kept tapping against the windows at night. But inside you, something was quietly collapsing. I saw the nights when you sat alone in the dark with cold coffee resting beside you long after midnight. I saw your trembling hands holding your phone, hoping someone would say the words your soul desperately needed to hear. I saw you stare at the ceiling at 3 a.m. while silence filled the room so heavily it almost felt alive. And still, you told everyone you were fine. My child, you became so used to surviving that you forgot what peace even feels like. You laughed while carrying sorrow in secret. You smiled while your spirit felt exhausted. You answered messages while fighting tears behind the screen. Even now, there is a part of you that feels guilty for being tired, guilty for feeling weak, guilty for not being stronger after everything you have already survived. But listen to me tonight. You were never meant to carry this alone. I know about the prayers you whispered quietly into the darkness, the ones spoken through tears while thunder rolled outside your window, the ones that barely made it past your lips because disappointment had already convinced you nothing would change. You kept asking me if I could still hear you. You kept wondering why heaven felt so silent. And slowly, without realizing it, your heart began preparing itself for more disappointment instead of hope. But I was there. I never left that room. I was there when you sat at the edge of the bed trying to stop your breathing from shaking. I was there when exhaustion wrapped around your chest so tightly you thought something inside you might finally break. I was there during those long drives through wet streets when tears blurred your vision and you kept pretending the rain was the reason your face was wet. My child, Toss saw every hidden breakdown, even the ones nobody else noticed. There were nights when you almost gave up emotionally. Not always physically, not always completely. But deep inside, something in you whispered, I cannot keep doing this anymore. And that whisper scared you. Because you remember who you used to be. You remember when your faith felt alive. You remember when hope came naturally. You remember when you could pray without feeling numb halfway through the words. Now sometimes you sit in silence instead, staring into the darkness while distant sirens echo somewhere outside and the loneliness feels louder than your own thoughts. But hear me carefully tonight, my child. Your exhaustion does not offend me. Your tears do not scare me. Your questions do not push me away. I know you have been trying to stay strong for too long. I know you have been carrying emotional wounds you never properly healed from. Some of those wounds came from betrayal. Some came from abandonment. Some came from prayers that seemed unanswered. And some came from simply surviving too many painful seasons back to back without rest. You kept telling yourself to keep going, to push harder, to stop feeling so much, to stop crying, to stop breaking down in empty kitchens under dim lights while the rest of the world slept peacefully. But your soul has been exhausted for a very long time. That heaviness you feel at night, that ache that appears for no clear reason, that emptiness that suddenly hits while scrolling your phone in silence. It is not weakness. It is the sound of a weary heart asking to be held. And tonight, my child, I am holding you closer than you realize. You think I abandoned you because the answers did not come quickly. You think I stopped listening because the pain lasted longer than expected. But there were things happening around your life that you could not yet see. There were moments when I protected you from doors that would have destroyed your peace completely. There were people I quietly removed because they would have wounded your spirit even deeper. There were delays that felt cruel in the moment but were actually mercy wearing unfamiliar clothing. Still, I know the waiting hurt you. I know how difficult it became to trust again after disappointment visited your life over and over. That is why your heart now hesitates before hoping. That is why part of you expects sadness even during peaceful moments. You have lived in survival mode for so long that calmness itself feels unfamiliar. But my child, this is not the end of your story. The tears you cried in silence were not invisible to me. The nights you spent curled beneath blankets trying to silence the noise in your mind were not wasted nights. The moments you almost broke apart emotionally were not proof that you are failing. They were proof that you are human, and tired humans still deserve grace. Tonight, while the rain falls softly outside and the darkness surrounds the room around you, I need you to stop fighting yourself for just a moment. Stop punishing yourself for being exhausted. Stop calling yourself weak because your heart became heavy. Stop believing you are difficult to love simply because you are hurting. You do not need to earn my compassion. You already have it. And even though you cannot fully see it yet, something inside you is beginning to awaken again. Very slowly, very quietly, like the first small light appearing before dawn after the longest night imaginable. But there is something else I need to tell you tonight, my child. Something your heart may not fully understand yet. The pain you thought was punishment was actually preparation. My child, I know there were nights when you stopped praying halfway through your own sentences because disappointment had already convinced you that silence was the only answer you would receive. You remember those nights, don't you? The room dimly lit by the pale glow of a phone screen. Rain sliding slowly down the glass outside your window. A cold cup of coffee sitting untouched beside you because your stomach had become too heavy with anxiety to even finish drinking it. The clock moving past 2 a.m., then 3 a.m., while your thoughts refused to let you rest. You whispered words toward heaven anyway, softly, carefully, almost like you were afraid to hope too much. God, are you still there? But after weeks turned into months, and months turned into painful seasons, the silence started changing you. At first you kept waiting with faith, then you waited with confusion, then frustration arrived quietly, and eventually exhaustion settled into your spirit like a deep winter that would not leave. My child, I know the prayers you thought I ignored. I know the moments when you begged me to remove the pain, open a door, heal your heart. Restore your peace, calm your fear, rescue your mind from overthinking. And when nothing changed immediately, part of you began believing I had turned away from you. But listen to me carefully tonight. My silence was never abandonment. There are things your heart could not see while you were crying in the darkness. There were dangers hidden behind some of the doors you begged me to open. There were people you desperately wanted to stay who would have slowly destroyed the gentleness of your spirit. There were opportunities that looked beautiful on the surface, but carried emptiness underneath. And still, because you are human, the waiting hurt deeply. You watched other people receive answers while your own life felt suspended in silence. You kept wondering why everyone else seemed to move forward while you remained emotionally stuck in the same exhausting cycle. Some nights you even questioned your own worth. Maybe I am forgotten. Maybe God listens to everyone except me. Maybe I did something wrong, my child. Ta heard every one of those thoughts. Even the thoughts you felt ashamed to admit. Even the anger you buried beneath forced smoothes. Even the moments when you sat in your car during heavy rain gripping the steering wheel while tears rolled silently down your face because you no longer understood why life hurt this much. I was there, closer than your next breath. You see, human hearts often mistake silence for absence. But silence does not mean I stopped working. Seeds grow in silence. Healing begins in silence. The sky changes quietly before dawn arrives, and some of the greatest miracles begin in places that appear empty at first. The problem is, your pain made you believe nothing was happening. That is what grief does sometimes. It narrows your vision until all you can see is what you lost. It fills your nights with questions that have no immediate answers. It makes every delayed prayer feel personal. And slowly, without realizing it, your soul became afraid to expect goodness anymore. You started protecting yourself emotionally. You stopped becoming vulnerable in prayer. You spoke to me less honestly because disappointment had wounded your trust. You still believed in me. But there were nights you no longer believed good things could happen for you personally. That quiet heartbreak stayed hidden inside you for a long time. You carried it into empty grocery store aisles beneath fluorescent lights. You carried it while lying awake listening to distant sirens outside your apartment window. You carried it while pretending to enjoy conversations that no longer reached your exhausted heart. You carried it while scrolling endlessly at midnight trying to distract yourself from the heaviness sitting in your chest. But tonight, my child, I need you to understand something important. Just because I did not answer in the way you expected does not mean I failed you. Sometimes my protection feels painful before it feels merciful. Sometimes I close doors while you are still knocking, because I can already see the heartbreak waiting behind them. Sometimes I allow silence because your soul is being prepared for something deeper than temporary comfort. You kept asking why certain people walked away, why certain plans collapsed, why certain dreams suddenly disappeared after you prayed so hard for them. And while you cried over those endings, I was protecting your future quietly. There are heartbreaks you survived only because I intervened invisibly. There are disasters you never saw because I blocked them before they reached you. There are moments when your life almost moved toward destruction without you realizing how close you came. My child, something dangerous almost entered your life recently. You did not recognize it because it looked familiar. It looked comforting. It looked like the answer to your loneliness. But hidden beneath it was deeper pain, deeper confusion, deeper emotional darkness. And when I disrupted it, you called the disruption suffering. But I was saving you. I know that is difficult to understand, while your heart still aches. I know there are nights when the silence still hurts you deeply. I know you still replay old prayers wondering why things unfolded the way they did. But hear me tonight, the story is not finished yet. You are standing in the middle of a chapter, not at the end of your life. And chapters in the middle often feel confusing because you cannot yet see how everything connects. One day you will understand why certain delays protected you. One day you will see why some closed doors were acts of mercy. One day you will realize I was still carrying you even while you questioned whether I remained near. But tonight I simply need you to trust me enough to stay. Stay through the silence. Stay through the healing process. Stay through the nights when your faith feels weak and trembling. Stay even when your heart does not fully understand what I am doing yet. Because, my child, there is something else you must know. The weight you have been carrying for so long was never yours to carry alone. My child, you have been carrying invisible weight for so long that you no longer remember what it feels like to breathe without pressure sitting on your chest. Even now, while you are listening to these words in the quiet of the night, part of you still feels tense. Your shoulders stay tight without realizing it. Your thoughts never fully rest. Your spirit keeps preparing for the next disappointment before the current pain has even healed. You became used to surviving storms that never seemed to end, and slowly, survival became your personality. You wake up tired. You go to sleep emotionally drained. You move through crowded places feeling strangely disconnected from everyone around you. Even laughter sometimes feels distant now, like something your heart remembers but cannot fully reach anymore. I have watched you carry burdens you never spoke about aloud. The pressure to appear strong, the fear of disappointing others, the guilt you still replay in silence, the regret that visits your thoughts late at night when the room grows quiet enough for old memories to return. My child, you were never meant to carry all of this alone, but somewhere along the way you convinced yourself that you had no other choice. So you kept pushing yourself forward even while your soul begged for rest. You kept saying, "I'm okay," even while anxiety quietly consumed your peace. You kept answering people with kindness while privately fighting emotional exhaustion that nobody could see. And every time your heart tried to collapse, you forced yourself to stand again before you were fully healed. That is why you feel so tired now. Not because you are weak, but because you have been strong for too long without comfort. I saw the moments you sat alone in the kitchen after midnight staring into nothing while the hum of the refrigerator filled the slants around you. I saw the nights when thunder echoed outside while your mind replayed every mistake you wish you could undo. I saw your hands trembling quietly while reading messages that reopened wounds you tried hard to bury. And still you blamed yourself for hurting. My child, listen carefully tonight. Not every wound in your life was created by your failure. Some wounds came from loving people who did not know how to love gently. Some wounds came from carrying responsibilities that exhausted your spirit. Some wounds came from betrayal you never deserved, and some wounds came simply because life in this world can become unbearably heavy sometimes. Yet instead of giving yourself compassion, you punished yourself for bleeding. You kept thinking, if I were stronger, this wouldn't affect me. If my faith were deeper, I wouldn't feel this broken. If I mattered more, people wouldn't leave. But my child, those thoughts were never my voice. I never asked you to become emotionless in order to survive. I never asked you to pretend your pain did not exist. I never asked you to carry every burden silently until your spirit became numb. And that numbness has been growing quietly inside you for a long time. You notice it during small moments now. Moments that once would have touched your heart deeply suddenly feel distant. You stare out windows during rainy evenings feeling emotionally detached from your own life. You sit in rooms filled with people while loneliness still wraps around you like cold air. You pray, but sometimes your words feel empty before they even leave your mouth. That frightens you sometimes, because deep inside you wonder if something sacred inside you is disappearing. But hear me carefully tonight, my child. Your heart is not dead, it is exhausted. There is a difference. An exhausted heart struggles to feel hope because it has endured too much disappointment without rest. An exhausted soul becomes quiet because it has spent too long carrying fear, grief, anxiety, and hidden pain without being held gently. And you, my child, have been carrying emotional weight that would have broken many people completely. Still, you survived, even on the nights you cried beneath blankets while trying not to make noise. Even during those long drives under wet streetlights when loneliness sat beside you like a shadow. Even while staring at hospital lights, unread messages, unpaid bills, broken memories, or unanswered prayers. You survived, but survival alone is not the peace I desire for you. I do not want you merely existing from one exhausting day to the next. I do not want fear controlling your nervous system every waking moment. I do not want your mind trapped inside endless cycles of overthinking and emotional fatigue. I want your soul back, the real you. The gentle part of you that still believes healing is possible. The quiet part of you that still longs to feel safe again. The part of you that still secretly hopes life can become lighter someday. That version of you is not gone, my child. It has simply been buried beneath years of pressure and pain. But tonight, something inside you is beginning to awaken slowly. You may not fully recognize it yet. It is subtle, quiet, fragile. Like the soft sound of church bells echoing through distant rain before dawn begins to rise. Part of your heart is starting to realize that you cannot continue carrying everything alone anymore. And strangely, that realization is not weakness, it is the beginning of healing. Because healing starts the moment honesty enters the room, the moment you finally admit, I am tired. I am hurting. I do not know how much longer I can carry this. My child, I have been waiting for you to stop hiding your exhaustion from me, not because I wished to shame you, but because I wish to comfort you. You do not need to impress me with strength. You do not need to earn rest. You do not need to perform happiness while your spirit quietly collapses underneath the surface. Come to me honestly. Come exhausted. Come anxious. Come confused. Come grieving. But come, because there is something your heart still does not fully understand tonight. The numbness you feel inside yourself right now is not the end of your story. It is the moment before something sacred begins waking up again. My child, there was a moment when your heart quietly changed. Not all at once, not in one dramatic second. It happened slowly, like rain collecting drop by drop against a dark window at midnight. Like a room becoming colder little by little until you suddenly realize warmth disappeared hours ago. You did not wake up one morning deciding to become guarded. You became guarded after too many disappointments arrived without warning. After too many nights crying silently into pillows while pretending the next day that everything was normal. After too many moments where your kindness was returned with slunts, distance, betrayal, or misunderstanding. And eventually, your heart stopped opening the way it once did. I saw it happen. I saw the first time you swallowed your feelings instead of expressing them because vulnerability had become frightening. I saw the nights you stared at unread messages while anxiety twisted inside your chest. I saw the moments when disappointment sat beside you so often that hope itself began feeling dangerous. My child, there was a younger version of you who trusted more easily, a softer version, a hopeful version, a version that believed prayers would be answered quickly, a version that believed people would stay, a version that thought love would feel safe. But pain changed you, not because you wanted it to, but because survival taught your heart to build walls where openness once lived. Now you hesitate before becoming emotionally honest. You overthink every conversation afterward. You fear abandonment even in peaceful moments. You prepare yourself for loss before joy even has time to fully arrive. And sometimes you hate yourself for this. You wonder why you became so anxious. Why your mind races late at night while distant thunder rolls outside and sleep refuses to come. Why certain memories still reopen wounds you thought had already healed. Why your chest tightens the moment life starts feeling uncertain again. But my child, your heart was reacting to pain it never fully recovered from. You kept telling yourself to move on before you properly grieved. You kept functioning while emotionally bleeding underneath the surface. You kept surviving situations that quietly damaged your spirit while pretending they did not affect you deeply. And because of that, some part of your soul became tired of trusting. So your heart began closing slowly. You noticed it in little ways first. You stopped talking about your feelings as much. You stopped expecting people to truly understand you. You stopped asking for help because disappointment convinced you that carrying everything alone was safer. Even your prayers changed. There were nights when you still spoke to me, but carefully, almost cautiously, as if your soul was afraid of hoping too much again. You whispered prayers while sitting in dark bedrooms lit only by streetlights leaking through curtains. You spoke softly while tears rested in your eyes and exhaustion rested in your bones. But underneath those prayers was a fear you barely admitted aloud. What if nothing changes again? My child, Ta heard that fear every single time. And still, even while your heart was closing, I stayed beside you. I sat with you during those quiet drives through rain-covered streets when loneliness filled the silence louder than music ever could. I stayed near during the nights when emotional numbness frightened you more than sadness itself. I remained close while you stood in empty kitchens at 2 a.m. trying to convince yourself you were okay. You thought becoming numb would protect you. But numbness only made the loneliness feel heavier, because deep inside your soul still longs to feel safe enough to soften again. That longing is still alive inside you tonight. Even after everything, even after betrayal, even after disappointment, even after prayers that felt delayed for too long. My child, listen carefully to me now. You are not difficult to love because pain changed you. You are not broken beyond healing because your heart became guarded. You are not weak because anxiety now follows you into quiet moments. Your heart adapted to survive seasons that wounded you deeply, but survival mode was never meant to become your permanent home. There are nights now when you sit alone, scrolling endlessly, trying to distract yourself from feelings you cannot fully explain. The room feels quiet, but your mind feels unbearably loud. Memories revisit you without invitation. Regret creeps into your chest unexpectedly. And suddenly the loneliness feels almost physical. You miss who you used to be sometimes. You miss laughing without heaviness hiding underneath it. You miss sleeping peacefully without overthinking every future possibility. You miss praying without wondering whether heaven still hears your voice. And perhaps the hardest part of all, you miss feeling emotionally safe. But my child, your story did not end when your heart became wounded. The walls around your spirit may feel strong now, but they are not permanent. Healing has already begun touching places inside you that you thought would remain cold forever. Very quietly, very gently, I am teaching your heart how to breathe again. Not through pressure, not through shame, not through forcing yourself to move on, but through compassion, through rest, through truth, through my presence staying near you even while you struggle to trust it completely. There are parts of you still waiting to come back to life. The peaceful part, the hopeful part, the deeply loved part. And although you cannot fully see it yet, your heart is already beginning to crack open slightly beneath all the exhaustion and fear. But there is something else I must reveal to you tonight, my child. Part of the pain draining your spirit is connected to something or someone you have held on to for far too long. My child, for a long time I have been trying to get your attention gently. Not through fear, not through punishment, but through small warnings your spirit kept feeling deep inside. You noticed them, didn't you? That strange heaviness that suddenly appeared whenever you entered certain places. That exhaustion that grew worse around certain people. That quiet discomfort in your chest whenever you tried convincing yourself something unhealthy was still good for you. You kept calling it stress. You kept telling yourself you were overthinking. But your soul was trying to warn you that something around you was draining the life out of your spirit slowly. And still, you stayed near it, because loneliness makes people tolerate things that peace never would. I saw the nights when your intuition whispered that something was wrong, yet you ignored the feeling because your heart was afraid of losing more. I saw the moments when anxiety tightened inside your chest after conversations that left you emotionally empty. I saw how your mind became restless every time you tried forcing yourself to hold on to situations that were quietly harming you. My child, not everything that feels familiar is safe for your soul. Sometimes pain becomes so normal that peace itself starts feeling uncomfortable. Sometimes people grow attached to emotional chaos simply because silence reminds them how lonely they truly feel inside. And somewhere along the way, you began mistaking emotional survival for love, for purpose, even for identity. But tonight I need you to hear me clearly. The heaviness you have been feeling is not random. There were warning signs everywhere. The sleepless nights, the overthinking, the emotional exhaustion after certain interactions, the loss of peace every time you tried forcing things to remain the same. Your spirit has been trying to protect you, but you kept silencing your own discernment because part of you feared what would happen if you finally accepted the truth. You feared letting go. You feared change. You feared another ending. So instead you carried the burden longer than necessary, my child. I watched you sitting alone at night trying to convince yourself everything was still okay. The rain outside your window sounded calmer than the storm inside your thoughts. Your phone screen glowed softly in the darkness while your heart searched desperately for reassurance that never fully came. And even then, something inside you already knew. You knew certain things were no longer healthy for your spirit. You knew some doors were slowly leading you away from peace. You knew your soul felt tired in ways sleep alone could never fix. But because your heart feared emptiness, you stayed attached to what was hurting you. Listen carefully tonight, my child. Not every connection is sent to heal you. Not every opportunity is meant to stay, and not every voice speaking into your life deserves access to your spirit. Some things enter your life carrying confusion instead of peace. Some people drain your emotional strength while pretending to offer comfort. Some environments slowly suffocate the gentleness inside you until anxiety becomes your normal state of being. And for a long time, you ignored the warnings because you hoped things would somehow change on their own. But deep inside your soul kept crying for freedom. That is why your body feels constantly tired now. That is why your mind races at night. That is why your spirit feels restless even during moments that should feel peaceful. Your heart has been fighting battles your mouth never talks about. You keep trying to appear calm while your inner world feels unstable. You keep smiling while emotionally drowning underneath the surface. You keep telling people I'm just tired when the truth is much deeper than exhaustion. My child, you are standing close to a breaking point, and I do not say that to frighten you. I say it because I love you enough to warn you before your soul becomes even more wounded. Something cannot continue the way it has been. You already feel it. There are moments now when you suddenly go silent because your spirit no longer has energy to pretend. There are nights when tears arrive unexpectedly because the pressure inside your heart has become too heavy to contain. There are mornings when even simple tasks feel overwhelming because your emotional reserves have been depleted for too long. You keep trying to function while ignoring the deeper pain underneath everything, but healing cannot begin while denial remains in control. That is why I keep whispering to your spirit. That is why this message found you tonight. That is why your heart feels stirred while listening to these words in the middle of the night. Because part of you already knows change is necessary. My child, I never wanted you to lose yourself trying to keep everyone else comfortable. I never wanted fear to become the voice guiding your decisions. I never wanted your nervous system trapped in constant survival mode while pretending everything was fine. You deserve peace too. Not temporary distractions, not numbness, not forced smiles. Real peace, the kind that allows your shoulders to relax again. The kind that lets your mind rest without fear chasing every thought. The kind that makes your spirit feel safe enough to breathe deeply again. But first, something must break. Not your soul, not your future. The chains, the unhealthy attachments, the fear of disappointing people, the desperate need to hold on to what I have been asking you quietly to release. My child, there are situations you keep trying to save that are slowly destroying your peace instead. And every time your spirit warned you, you pushed the warning away because the truth felt too painful to face. But tonight I need you to stop running from what your soul already knows, because the breaking point approaching your life can become one of two things. It can either destroy the version of you built entirely on fear, or become the beginning of the person you were truly created to become. My child, there is a pain inside you that almost nobody truly knows about. Not because people never asked, but because somewhere along the way, you learned how to hide your suffering so well that even your smiles began convincing others you were okay. You became an expert at surviving quietly. You learned how to answer "I'm fine" while your chest felt heavy with sadness. You learned how to laugh in conversations while secretly feeling emotionally distant from everyone around you. You learned how to sit in crowded rooms carrying loneliness so deep that sometimes it frightened you. And every night when the world became quiet again, the hidden pain returned. I saw those moments, the moments when the lights were off and only the pale glow of streetlights slipped through your curtains. The moments when distant sirens echoed outside while your thoughts became unbearably loud inside your mind. The moments when you stared at the ceiling wondering why your heart still hurt after trying so hard to heal. My child, there are wounds inside you that never fully received comfort. Some pain you buried because you thought nobody would understand it. Some grief you carried because life forced you to keep moving before your soul had time to recover. And some tears you swallowed simply because you grew tired of explaining what was wrong. So instead you carried everything silently. You carried disappointment silently. You carried rejection silently. You carried emotional exhaustion silently. Even your prayers became quieter over time because deep down, part of you feared sounding desperate again. But tonight I want you to know something clearly. You do not have to hide your pain from me. I already see every part of it. I know the exact moment your heart stopped feeling emotionally safe. I know the conversations that changed something inside you forever. I know the nights you replayed memories over and over while rain tapped softly against the windows beside you. And my child, I know how lonely healing has felt for you. Because people often see the outside version of you. The functioning version, the polite version, the version that still goes to work, still answers messages, still tries to appear normal. But they do not always see the exhaustion underneath. They do not see how difficult some mornings have become. They do not see the emotional battles happening quietly inside your mind while you try to complete ordinary tasks. They do not see how much energy it takes for you just to keep pretending you are okay sometimes, and perhaps the hardest part of all. You started believing you had to carry this hidden pain alone because you did not want to become a burden. My child, hear me carefully tonight. Your pain does not make you a burden. Your tears do not make you weak. Your anxiety does not make you difficult to love. Your emotional exhaustion does not disappoint me. You have simply been hurt more deeply than most people realize. That is why your soul feels tired in places words cannot fully explain. That is why certain memories still affect your body physically. That is why nights feel heavier than mornings. That is why silence sometimes becomes unbearable because it leaves you alone with thoughts you spend all day trying to outrun. I have watched you scrolling endlessly late at night hoping distraction might quiet the ache in your chest. I have watched you sitting in parked cars after long days too emotionally drained to even walk inside immediately. I have watched you standing beneath hot showers trying to wash away sadness that water could never remove. And through all of it, you still kept trying, even when your spirit felt numb, even when hope became fragile, even when loneliness wrapped around your life like cold fog during sleepless nights. My child, you survived seasons that almost convinced you to stop believing in better days entirely. There were moments when the emotional pain became so constant that you forgot what inner peace even felt like. You became used to carrying heaviness everywhere. You became used to expecting disappointment. You became used to protecting yourself emotionally before anyone else had the chance to hurt you again. And slowly survival became your normal state. But survival is not the life I created you for. I did not create your heart merely to endure pain endlessly. I did not create your spirit to remain trapped in cycles of fear, overthinking, and emotional isolation forever. There is still tenderness inside you. There is still hope inside you. There is still a version of you capable of feeling safe, loved, and whole again. You may not fully believe that yet. I know disappointment made trust difficult. I know repeated heartbreak made vulnerability frightening. I know part of your heart expects pain even during peaceful moments now. But my child, healing is already beginning in places you cannot yet see. Very quietly, I have been protecting the fragile parts of your spirit from completely collapsing. Very gently, I have been keeping a small light alive inside you even during the darkest nights. And even now, while listening to these words, something inside your soul recognizes that you are not completely abandoned after all. That feeling in your chest right now, that mixture of emotion, sadness, relief, and longing. That is your heart remembering what comfort feels like. You have spent so long trying to survive alone that receiving gentleness now almost feels unfamiliar. But you do not have to fight alone anymore. I am still beside you in the sleepless nights. I am still beside you during the sont drives through rain-soaked streets. I am still beside you when anxiety tightens inside your chest for reasons you cannot explain. I am still beside you when memories revisit you unexpectedly in the middle of the night. And my child, there is something else you must understand tonight. The loneliness you feel is not proof that you are unloved. It is proof that your soul has been starving for something real. Because deep inside, you are no longer satisfied with merely surviving. You are beginning to long for peace again. My child, the exhaustion you feel is deeper than physical tiredness. Sleep has not fully restored you in a very long time, has it? Even after resting, your mind still wakes up heavy. Your body feels tense before the day even begins. Your heart already prepares itself for stress, disappointment, pressure, or emotional struggle before you even leave the bed. And some nights, no matter how exhausted you are, your thoughts refuse to let you sleep peacefully at all. I know those nights. The rain outside your window becomes softer than the noise inside your own mind. The clock slowly moves past midnight while you stare into darkness, replaying conversations, regrets, fears, and unanswered questions. Your chest feels tight for reasons you cannot fully explain. You close your eyes hoping for peace, yet your spirit feels restless instead. My child, your soul has been carrying fear for too long. That is why you feel so tired all the time. You are emotionally exhausted from surviving constant inner battles nobody else can see. Battles with anxiety, battles with overthinking, battles with loneliness, battles with the fear that life may never truly feel peaceful again. You have spent so much energy trying to hold yourself together that your spirit barely remembers what true rest feels like anymore. Even simple things drain you now. Small disappointments hit harder than they once did. Certain conversations leave your chest feeling heavy for hours afterward. Some mornings you wake up already overwhelmed without understanding exactly why. And still, you blame yourself for being tired. You tell yourself to be stronger. You tell yourself to stop overthinking. You tell yourself to just move on. But my child, exhausted hearts cannot heal through pressure. Your spirit has been starving for gentleness. I see how hard you try to function normally. I see how you continue answering people politely even when your emotional energy feels empty. I see how you force yourself through responsibilities while secretly wishing you could disappear from the pressure for just a little while. And I know the guilt that follows afterward, because part of you feels ashamed for struggling. Part of you believes everyone else handles life better than you do. Part of you fears becoming too emotionally overwhelmed to keep carrying everything the way you always have. But listen to me carefully tonight. You are not lazy, you are not weak, you are weary. There is a difference. A weary soul can smile while secretly breaking. A weary heart can continue functioning while quietly drowning underneath the surface. A weary mind keeps racing because it no longer knows how to feel safe enough to rest completely. That has been your reality for longer than most people realize. You became used to emotional survival mode, always anticipating problems, always preparing for disappointment, always expecting something painful to happen next. Even during peaceful moments, part of your mind remains alert, waiting for the calm to disappear. My child, constant fear exhausts the human spirit, and fear has been sitting beside you for a very long time now. Fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of failing, fear of being abandoned again, fear that your prayers may never fully be answered. These fears followed you into sleepless nights. They followed you into quiet car rides beneath wet streetlights. They followed you into empty kitchens while cold coffee sat untouched beside you at 2 a.m. And over time, the fear became so constant that your nervous system forgot how to relax completely. That is why your body feels heavy. That is why silence sometimes feels uncomfortable. That is why your thoughts spiral the moment life slows down enough for your emotions to surface. My child, your spirit was never created to live in permanent survival mode. You were created for peace too, not temporary distraction, not emotional numbness, not pretending to be okay while quietly collapsing inside. Real peace, the kind that quiets your breathing, the kind that softens the tension in your chest, the kind that allows your mind to rest without expecting disaster around every corner. And tonight I need you to understand something important. The exhaustion you feel is not proof that you are failing. Sometimes exhaustion is the soul's cry for healing. Your heart has been carrying unresolved grief, unspoken pain, hidden loneliness, unhealed disappointment, and emotions you buried because life demanded that you keep moving forward too quickly. But buried pain does not disappear. It waits quietly underneath the surface until the soul becomes too tired to carry it anymore. That is where you are now, my child. Your spirit cannot continue pretending everything is fine while quietly starving for peace. And perhaps that frightens you, because you're afraid of what happens if you finally stop pretending to be strong all the time. You fear falling apart completely. You fear becoming too overwhelmed to recover. But hear me carefully tonight. Breaking down is not always destruction. Sometimes it is the beginning of honesty. Sometimes it is the first moment healing becomes possible. For too long you have tried healing by ignoring your pain. For too long you have tried finding peace while refusing to acknowledge how deeply exhausted your soul truly became. But tonight, your spirit is finally becoming honest. You are tired, you are hurting, you are emotionally overwhelmed, and you cannot keep carrying this weight alone anymore. That honesty is not weakness, it is the beginning of restoration. Because once the soul stops pretending, healing can finally enter the room. And my child, even though you do not fully see it yet, something is already beginning to leave your life quietly. The heaviness will not remain forever. The constant pressure will not control your spirit forever. The darkness surrounding your thoughts will not last forever. Something is shifting, very slowly, very gently, like dawn beginning to rise through the darkness after an impossibly long night. But before peace fully arrives, there is still one painful truth inside you that must finally come into the light. My child, there is something your heart keeps returning to in silence. A memory, a mistake, a season of your life that still follows you into quiet nights no matter how hard you try to move forward. You rarely speak about it aloud anymore, but it still lives inside your thoughts. Sometimes it appears suddenly while you are driving through rain-covered streets at night. Sometimes it returns while you lie awake staring into darkness long after midnight. Sometimes it slips quietly into your chest during peaceful moments and steals the calm you are finally beginning to feel. And every time it returns, you blame yourself all over again. My child, you have carried guilt for so long that it has started shaping the way you see yourself. You replay conversations wishing you had said different words. You replay decisions wishing you had chosen another path. You replay moments where pain caused you to react from fear, exhaustion, loneliness, or heartbreak. And deep inside, part of you still believes if I had done better, maybe everything would have turned out differently. I know that thought has haunted you. I know the nights you sat alone beneath dim lights while regret wrapped itself around your chest like chains. I know how your mind keeps revisiting old memories, searching desperately for a version of the story where nobody got hurt. I know how shame quietly follows you even during moments when nobody else realizes you are struggling internally. But hear me carefully tonight, my child. You were never meant to live imprisoned by your past forever. Yes, you made mistakes. Yes, there are things you wish you could undo. Yes, there were moments where pain affected your choices. But your worst moments are not the full truth about who you are. The enemy has spent a long time convincing you that your failures define you completely. That your brokenness disqualifies you from peace. That your regrets make you unworthy of healing love or restoration. But those thoughts never came from me. I do not look at you the way shame looks at you. Shame says you will never change, but I say you are still becoming. Shame says you ruined everything, but I say your story is not finished. Shame keeps dragging your attention backward into darkness, but I keep calling your heart forward toward healing. My child, you have punished yourself long enough. There were nights when guilt became so heavy that even your prayers felt difficult to speak. You sat quietly in the dark, feeling emotionally unworthy of my presence. You wondered if I still loved you after everything. You wondered if heaven grew tired of hearing from someone who kept struggling with the same pain. But listen to me tonight. I never stopped loving you, not once. Not during your weakest moments. Not during your confusion. Not during your emotional breakdowns. Not during the nights you questioned your own worth. My love for you was never dependent on perfection. Yet your heart still struggles to believe that fully. Because guilt changes the way people see themselves. It makes every flaw feel bigger. It makes every failure feel permanent. It whispers lies during sleepless nights until the soul becomes exhausted from fighting its own thoughts. And you, my child, have been fighting yourself for a very long time. You carry regret in your body now, in your shoulders, in your breathing, in the tension you feel during quiet moments. Even when others forgive you, part of you still refuses to release yourself. Why? Because deep down you fear that forgiving yourself means pretending the pain never happened. But forgiveness is not denial. Forgiveness is releasing yourself from endless punishment. You cannot heal while constantly reopening old wounds with shame. You cannot move forward while chaining your identity to the darkest chapters of your past. And my child, some of the things you blame yourself for were never entirely your burden to carry alone. You were hurting too. You were exhausted too. You were emotionally overwhelmed too. There were battles happening inside you that nobody else fully understood at the time. And although pain does not erase responsibility, neither does responsibility erase grace. There is still grace for you tonight. Even now, especially now, I see how difficult it has become for you to accept kindness without suspicion. I see how quickly you criticize yourself for every small mistake. I see how your heart immediately prepares for rejection whenever you feel imperfect. My child, you have been talking to yourself with cruelty for too long. You speak to yourself in ways I never would. You call yourself hopeless when you are actually wounded. You call yourself weak when you are actually exhausted. You call yourself broken beyond repair when healing is already beginning quietly inside you. And tonight I need you to stop listening to the voice of condemnation, because I am not calling you to endless shame. I am calling you to restoration. The rain outside your window tonight does not condemn the earth for being dry before the storm arrived. It simply falls gently, bringing renewal little by little. That is how my mercy works too, not through humiliation, not through emotional cruelty, but through compassion powerful enough to soften even the hardest pain. My child, I know there are still tears hidden inside you connected to things you wish had unfolded differently. I know there are regrets you still carry into lonely nights. I know there are moments you wish you could relive with greater wisdom, greater patience, greater peace, but you cannot heal by living backward forever. At some point, your soul must accept that the past cannot be rewritten. But your future is still being written right now. And the person you are becoming through this pain is not worthless. You are becoming more compassionate, more honest, more spiritually awake, more aware of how deeply human hearts need gentleness. Your suffering did not destroy your soul completely. It deepened it. But there is still one hidden wound remaining beneath all the guilt you carry tonight, my child. Deep inside, you still believe you are unworthy of being fully loved. My child, there is a lie that has followed you quietly for a very long time. It does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it whispers instead, softly, patiently. Late at night when your heart is already tired and your defenses are weak. It speaks during sleepless hours while rain taps gently against your window. It speaks when the room is dark and your thoughts become impossible to silence. It speaks when disappointment returns again and your spirit feels too exhausted to fight back anymore. And the lie says this: you are forgotten. You are too broken. Nothing will ever change. My child, that lie has wounded your spirit more deeply than you realize. Because after hearing it long enough, part of you started believing it was true. You began seeing yourself through the lens of failure instead of grace. You began expecting abandonment before love even had the chance to stay. You began assuming disappointment before hope had the opportunity to bloom. And slowly, without noticing, despair became the background noise of your life. Even during peaceful moments, the lie still whispered. When someone cared about you, the lie whispered, They will leave eventually. When something good began unfolding, the lie whispered, "It won't last." When your heart started healing slightly, the lie whispered, "You are only pretending to be okay." My child, the enemy often works quietly, not always through destruction that appears obvious, but through hopelessness that slowly drains the light from the soul. And hopelessness has been exhausting you for years. That is why your mind overthinks constantly. That is why your chest tightens during uncertainty. That is why you struggle to fully relax even during calm moments. Part of you has been preparing for pain non-stop. You became emotionally alert all the time, waiting for disappointment to appear again. And eventually your nervous system forgot how to feel safe. I saw the nights when fear kept you awake long after midnight. I saw the moments you stared silently at the ceiling while your thoughts spiraled deeper and deeper into darkness. I saw you sitting in parked cars after long days, unable to gather enough emotional energy to walk inside immediately. And still, the lie kept whispering, "You are alone in this." But my child, listen carefully tonight. You are not abandoned. Even during the nights when you felt emotionally numb, I remained beside you. Even when your prayers sounded weak and uncertain, I still listened. Even when you questioned whether your life still mattered, I continued holding your future gently in my hands. The lie convinced you that silence meant absence, but silence never meant I stopped loving you. You simply became so wounded by disappointment that your heart struggled to recognize my presence anymore. Pain can do that sometimes. Pain narrows vision. Pain makes darkness feel permanent. Pain makes temporary seasons feel eternal. And because your soul became exhausted, the lie gained more influence over your thoughts than truth did. You stopped seeing yourself the way I see you. Instead of seeing resilience, you saw weakness. Instead of seeing survival, you saw failure. Instead of seeing growth, you only saw scars. My child, scars are not proof that you are ruined. They are proof that you survived battles that tried to destroy you. But the enemy wanted your scars to become prisons instead of reminders of survival. That is why the lie kept feeding your fear. Because fearful hearts are easier to control. Fear made you doubt your worth. Fear made you stay attached to things draining your peace. Fear made you settle for emotional survival instead of true healing. Fear made you believe you would always feel this heavy inside. But tonight, something inside your spirit is beginning to wake up again. You may feel it already, a small resistance rising against the hopelessness, a quiet voice deep inside saying, "Maybe this is not the end, my child." That voice is truth trying to return to your soul. Because despite everything you survived, your heart still secretly longs for healing. You still long for peace. You still long to feel safe enough to rest emotionally again. You still hope there is more waiting for your life than endless exhaustion and silent grief. And there is, but before healing fully enters your life, the lie must lose its power over your mind. You cannot continue calling yourself worthless while asking for peace. You cannot continue believing you are unloved while searching desperately for comfort. You cannot continue expecting darkness forever while I am already preparing light ahead of you. My child, you have survived things that should have destroyed your spirit completely. Yet somehow, even now, there is still softness inside you. Still kindness, still compassion, still longing for goodness. That alone is proof that darkness did not fully win. You think you are weaker than other people because you feel emotions deeply. But sensitivity is not weakness. It simply means your soul was never created to become cold. The world tried hard to harden your heart. Disappointment tried to silence your hope. Fear tried to convince you that emotional numbness was safer than vulnerability. But I am calling your spirit back to life tonight. Slowly, gently, patiently, like dawn slowly touching the horizon after endless rain. And although the healing process will not happen overnight, one important shift is already beginning inside you now. You are becoming tired of the lie, tired of self-hatred, tired of fear controlling your peace, tired of expecting abandonment constantly, tired of carrying hopelessness everywhere like chains wrapped around your spirit. That exhaustion is important, my child, because the moment a soul becomes tired of darkness, it finally begins reaching toward light again. And tonight, whether you fully realize it yet or not, a major emotional shift has already begun. My child, you keep wondering why you clicked on this message tonight. Out of all the videos, all the noise, all the distractions surrounding your life right now, why did your heart stop here? Why did these words suddenly feel personal? Why does something inside your chest feel stirred while listening in the quiet of the night? It is because your soul has been crying out for help longer than your mouth has been willing to admit. Even now, part of you still tries to minimize your pain. You tell yourself others have it worse. You tell yourself to stop being emotional. You tell yourself you should already be healed by now. But my child, the heart can only carry hidden sorrow for so long before it begins searching desperately for light. That is why this message found you tonight. Not by accident, not randomly. Your spirit was searching for something real in the middle of all the exhaustion. I know the nights you spent scrolling endlessly through your phone, trying to distract yourself from the heaviness sitting quietly inside your chest. I know how loneliness followed you into rooms filled with people. I know how you kept functioning outwardly while inwardly feeling emotionally disconnected from your own life. And still, somewhere deep inside your soul continued whispering one silent prayer. Please let something change. My child, I heard that prayer. Even when you did not speak it aloud, even when tears replaced words, even when exhaustion left you too numb to pray properly anymore. I heard you. That is why these words found you tonight while the rain falls softly outside your window. That is why your heart suddenly feels emotional while the rest of the world sleeps peacefully around you. That is why you cannot fully look away from this message, even if part of you still wants to protect itself from hope. Because your spirit recognizes something familiar here. Comfort, truth, presence. For a very long time, you have felt emotionally alone in your struggles. You became so used to carrying pain privately that being understood now almost feels unfamiliar. But my child, I understand every hidden part of your suffering. I understand the exhaustion behind your silence. I understand the fear behind your overthinking. I understand the grief behind the smiles you give people every day. And I understand the loneliness you never fully explain to anyone. The loneliness of feeling emotionally tired all the time. The loneliness of pretending you are okay because you no longer know how to describe what is wrong. The loneliness of lying awake at 3 a.m. listening to distant thunder while your thoughts spiral through memories, fears, regrets, and unanswered questions. You thought nobody truly saw that pain, but I did. I was there during the nights when your breathing felt heavy from anxiety. I was there when your chest tightened for reasons you could not explain logically. I was there while tears rolled silently down your face during long drives beneath wet streetlights. And even when your faith became fragile, I stayed. My child, you almost gave up emotionally more than once. Not always publicly, not dramatically, but quietly. You stopped expecting joy. You stopped expecting peace. You stopped believing life could truly feel lighter again. And because disappointment became so familiar, your heart slowly stopped hoping for healing completely. But tonight, something is changing. Very softly, your spirit is opening again. Not fully, not all at once, but enough to listen, enough to stay, enough to let these words reach the wounded places inside you that have been starving for comfort. That matters more than you realize, because healing often begins with a single moment where the soul finally feels seen. And tonight your soul feels seen. You are realizing that your pain is not invisible. Your exhaustion is not weakness, your tears are not shameful, and your life is not forgotten. My child, you kept asking for signs without realizing this message itself is part of the answer you have been searching for. Not because these words alone solve everything overnight, but because they are reminding your spirit of something important you nearly lost completely. Hope, real hope, not forced positivity, not pretending everything is fine. But the quiet realization that maybe your story is not over yet after all. That realization frightens you slightly, doesn't it? Because hope feels risky when disappointment has wounded you repeatedly. Part of your heart still fears believing again. Part of you still waits for sadness to return and take away every peaceful feeling before it fully settles inside you. But my child, I am teaching your spirit something new now. Peace does not come from controlling every outcome. Peace comes from knowing you are no longer carrying your suffering alone. That is why this message found you tonight, because you have been trying to survive without comfort for too long. You have been trying to carry emotional burdens without rest for too long. You have been trying to silence inner pain instead of healing it for too long. And your soul finally reached the point where it needed truth more than distraction, needed gentleness more than numbness, needed healing more than survival. My child, your heart is closer to restoration than you realize right now. Even though fear still lingers, even though questions remain unanswered, even though certain wounds still ache deeply during quiet nights, something inside you has already begun turning slowly toward light again. And tonight, before this moment passes, I need you to hear one more truth clearly. The peace you have been searching for everywhere else has been quietly waiting for you to return to me all along. My child, the loudest battle in your life right now is not happening around you. It is happening inside your mind. And some nights that battle becomes so exhausting that even silence feels heavy. You know those nights well, don't you? The room grows dark and quiet. Rain taps softly against the window. The world around you slows down enough for your thoughts to finally become impossible to ignore, and suddenly your mind begins racing again. You replay conversations. You overanalyze small details. You imagine worst-case scenarios before tomorrow even arrives. You think about everything that could go wrong, everything you regret, everything you fear losing. And the more you think, the more trapped you feel inside your own head. My child, anxiety has exhausted your spirit for a long time now. Not always loudly, not always dramatically. Sometimes it appears quietly, a tight feeling in your chest while driving home at night beneath wet streetlights. A sudden heaviness in your stomach when your phone lights up unexpectedly. An inability to relax even during peaceful moments because part of you still expects bad news to arrive at any second. You became so used to emotional survival mode that your mind forgot how to fully rest. Even when your body sits still, your thoughts keep running. And because of that, exhaustion follows you everywhere. I see how hard you try to control everything mentally. You think if you prepare enough, worry enough, analyze enough, maybe you can protect yourself from future pain. But my child, overthinking has never truly given your soul peace. It only made your nights heavier. You know this already. You know what it feels like to stare at the ceiling at 3 a.m. while your mind refuses to become quiet. You know what it feels like to physically feel anxiety moving through your body while nobody around you notices the storm happening internally. You know what it feels like to smile outwardly while inwardly feeling emotionally overwhelmed by thoughts you cannot seem to escape. And perhaps the hardest part is this: you became tired of your own mind. There are moments now when you wish you could simply turn your thoughts off for a while. Moments when even simple decisions feel emotionally exhausting because your brain never truly stops. My child, I know how draining this has become for you. I know about the panic hidden beneath your calm voice. I know about the fear hiding behind your overthinking. I know how deeply your spirit longs for stillness, and I know that part of you secretly fears things may never feel peaceful again. But hear me carefully tonight. Your anxious thoughts are not stronger than my presence. Even during the nights when your mind spirals into darkness, I remain beside you. Even when fear convinces you that everything is falling apart, I am still holding you together quietly. Even when your thoughts become loud and unbearable, my voice has not disappeared. The problem is not that I stopped speaking. The problem is that fear became louder inside your mind than peace. Fear repeats itself constantly. Fear imagines disaster before it happens. Fear convinces exhausted souls that rest is unsafe. And because you have survived painful seasons before, your mind started believing constant alertness was necessary for survival. So now your nervous system remains tense even when danger is no longer present. Your thoughts race even during quiet evenings. Your body struggles to relax because your spirit has been carrying unresolved fear for too long. My child, you are not crazy for struggling like this. You are wounded, you are overwhelmed, you are emotionally exhausted, and your mind has been trying desperately to protect your heart from more pain. But tonight I need you to understand something important. Not every thought deserves your trust. Some thoughts are born from fear, not truth. Some thoughts come from wounds, not wisdom. Some thoughts are simply echoes of old pain repeating themselves inside your exhausted mind. Yet you have spent years believing every fearful thought automatically reflects reality. That is why your peace disappears so quickly sometimes. That is why uncertainty frightens you deeply. That is why silence can feel dangerous instead of restful. But my child, peace begins when your soul learns it no longer has to carry tomorrow alone. You were never created to mentally control every outcome. You were never meant to predict every heartbreak before it arrives. You were never designed to carry the weight of the entire future inside your thoughts every night. That burden is crushing your spirit slowly, and I see it. I see the nights when you grab your chest because anxiety suddenly rises for no clear reason. I see the mornings when exhaustion follows you before the day even begins. I see the emotional fatigue hidden behind your sons. But I also see something else beginning inside you tonight. Your soul is becoming tired of fear controlling your life. You are beginning to realize that overthinking has not protected your peace, it has stolen it. And deep inside, your spirit is beginning to long for something different now. Stillness, rest, quietness, trust, real peace. Not temporary distraction through scrolling endlessly at midnight. Not emotional numbness, not pretending your anxiety does not exist. True inner stillness, the kind that calms your breathing, the kind that softens your racing thoughts, the kind that allows your heart to finally feel safe enough to stop preparing for disaster constantly. My child, that peace is not as far away as you think. Even now, while listening to these words in the quiet of the night, your spirit is slowly beginning to unclench. Something inside you recognizes truth again. Something inside you feels held instead of abandoned. That feeling matters, because healing begins the moment the soul realizes it no longer has to fight every battle alone. And tonight your heart is finally beginning to hear my voice again beneath all the noise. Softly, gently, patiently, like distant church bells echoing through rain after the longest night imaginable. But there is still something your soul must understand. Before peace fully settles inside you, my child, you have spent so long feeling unseen by people that you forgot how deeply seen you already are by me. My child, there were moments when you truly believed nobody cared about what was happening inside you anymore. Not because people never spoke to you, not because you were completely alone physically, but because emotional loneliness is different. It is possible to stand in crowded rooms and still feel invisible. It is possible to answer messages all day and still feel deeply disconnected inside. It is possible to smile at people while carrying silent pain nobody notices behind your eyes. And you, my child, have carried that kind of loneliness for a very long time. I saw the nights when your phone stayed quiet and the silence in the room felt heavier than usual. I saw the moments when you wanted someone to ask if you were truly okay. Not casually, but sincerely. I saw the exhaustion in your spirit after spending so much time pretending you were stronger than you actually felt. You became so used to hiding your pain that eventually people stopped realizing how deeply you were struggling. And slowly a dangerous thought entered your heart. Nobody would notice if I disappeared emotionally. My child, that thought wounded you deeply. Because once the human heart begins believing it is unseen, hopelessness grows quietly in the dark. You started withdrawing emotionally. You stopped expressing certain feelings because you feared becoming too much for others. You stopped expecting comfort because disappointment had already convinced you not to need it anymore. And eventually loneliness became familiar. You carried it into grocery stores beneath fluorescent lights. You carried it through rainy drives late at night. You carried it into sleepless hours when the clock moved past 3 a.m. And your thoughts became unbearably loud. Even during conversations, part of your spirit often felt far away. as if nobody fully understood the weight you were carrying inside. But my child, I understood. I saw the tears you wiped away quickly before anyone else noticed. I saw you sitting quietly at the edge of your bed, staring into darkness while your chest felt heavy with emotions you could not explain properly. I saw the nights you begged silently for one moment of comfort while thunder echoed outside your window. And even during the moments when you felt forgotten by everyone else, I never looked away from you. Not once. I know it became difficult for you to believe that anyone truly cared deeply anymore. Pain taught your heart to expect distance. Disappointment taught your spirit not to rely too heavily on people. And abandonment, whether emotional or physical, left wounds that still ache quietly beneath the surface. That is why your soul became cautious. That is why vulnerability now frightens you sometimes. That is why part of you expects people to eventually leave once they truly see how tired you are inside. My child, you became afraid of becoming emotionally honest because you feared your pain would overwhelm others. So instead, you carried it silently. You carried it while sitting in parked cars after difficult days. You carried it while lying awake replaying conversations in your mind. You carried it while standing in showers trying to release stress your spirit no longer knew how to hold. And eventually, loneliness began changing the way you viewed yourself. You started wondering whether something about you was simply too difficult to love completely, too emotional, too wounded, too complicated. But hear me carefully tonight. Your pain never made you unlovable. Your exhaustion never made you unwanted. Your anxiety never made you too much. Your tears never made you weak. You are human, my child, a deeply feeling human heart living through painful seasons. And despite what loneliness whispered to you at night, you were never invisible to me. I stayed beside you during every hidden breakdown. I remained near during every sleepless night. I listened during every silent prayer your lips could barely finish speaking. Even when your faith became fragile, I still cared for you deeply. The problem was not my absence. The problem was that loneliness became so loud inside your mind that it drowned out your ability to feel my presence clearly. Loneliness can do that. It convinces people they are forgotten. It tells wounded hearts that nobody truly notices their suffering. It whispers that healing will never come because no one genuinely understands the depth of the pain. But tonight your soul is beginning to remember something important again. You are seen, not partially, not superficially, completely. I see the fears you never say aloud. I see the grief hidden beneath your tired smile. I see how badly your spirit longs for peace, safety, tenderness, and rest. And my child, I care more deeply than you realize. There were nights when you cried yourself to sleep while believing heaven had become silent toward you. But I was still near. There were moments when emotional exhaustion made you feel spiritually numb. But I was still holding your heart carefully through every dark hour. There were seasons when loneliness convinced you your life no longer mattered deeply to anyone. But your existence has always mattered to me. You are not random, you are not forgotten, and you are not surviving this painful season alone. Even now, while listening to these words in the middle of the night, something inside your spirit is softening slightly. That ache in your chest, that mixture of sadness and comfort rising quietly inside you, that is your soul realizing it has not been abandoned after all. And my child, there is still healing ahead of you that you cannot yet fully imagine. There are still moments of peace your heart has not experienced yet. There are still connections capable of bringing gentleness instead of pain. There are still mornings where the heaviness will not feel this overwhelming forever. You may not fully believe that tonight, I understand. But healing often begins before the wounded heart feels ready to trust it completely. And although your spirit still carries fear, hope is quietly returning now too, because somewhere ahead of you, whether you realize it yet or not, someone unexpected may become part of your healing journey. My child, there are still moments when you look back at certain endings in your life and wonder why they had to hurt so much. You still replay some of those closed doors in your mind during quiet nights. You still think about opportunities that disappeared unexpectedly. relationships that faded, prayers that seemed unanswered, plans that collapsed while you begged me to keep them alive. And deep inside, part of your heart still whispers, why did you let that happen? I know that question has followed you for a long time. I know the confusion you felt when things fell apart despite your prayers. I know how painful it became watching something you cared about slowly slip away while heaven remained silent. I know how betrayal, disappointment, and loss left your spirit standing in emotional ruins, wondering what happened to the future you imagined. But tonight, my child, I need you to hear something difficult and healing at the same time. Some doors closed because I was protecting you, not punishing you, not abandoning you, protecting you. I know it did not feel like protection in the moment. It felt like heartbreak. It felt like rejection. It felt like silence. It felt like sitting alone in dark rooms while rain fell outside your window. And tears rolled quietly down your face because nothing made sense anymore. You begged me to stop certain endings from happening. You pleaded for things to remain the same. You tried desperately to hold on to situations your spirit already knew were hurting you. And when those doors finally closed, your heart shattered. But my child, you could not see what I could see. You only saw the pain of losing something familiar. I saw the destruction waiting further ahead if those doors had remained open. There were paths you wanted desperately that would have drained the life from your spirit completely. There were people you begged to stay who carried confusion, instability, and emotional darkness deeper than you realized. There were opportunities that looked beautiful externally but would have quietly stolen your peace from the inside out. And because your heart was lonely, exhausted, and hungry for comfort, you mistook attachment for safety. But I saw beyond the moment. I saw the nights that would have become even heavier. I saw the anxiety that would have consumed your spirit further. I saw the emotional damage waiting behind certain relationships and situations you tried desperately to preserve. So I closed doors you did not understand. And yes, it hurt you deeply. I watched you cry after certain conversations ended. I watched you stare at old messages while grief tightened inside your chest. I watched you drive through rainy streets at night, replaying memories, trying to understand where everything changed. I know how painful those seasons became, especially because part of you interpreted the closed doors as proof that you were unwanted. You thought rejection meant you were not enough. You thought endings meant failure. You thought silence meant abandonment. But my child, not every ending is punishment. Sometimes an ending is mercy wearing unfamiliar clothing. I know you did not understand that at first. Pain rarely feels merciful while it is happening. Heartbreak rarely feels protective in the middle of the storm. But time has already started revealing certain truths to you slowly, hasn't it? Some things you cried over eventually revealed hidden toxicity. Some people you chased eventually showed patterns that would have destroyed your peace long term. Some closed doors later protected you from emotional pain, far greater than the disappointment of losing them. And even now, there are still things I protected you from that you never fully saw. There are heartbreaks that never reached you because I intervened quietly. There are disasters that almost entered your life but were blocked before they could fully unfold. There are situations you still call bad timing that were actually rescue. My child, your perspective was limited by pain. Mine was guided by love. That is why I need you to stop measuring my care for you by how many doors remained open. Sometimes love closes doors too. A loving parent removes dangerous things from a child's hands even when the child cries afterward. A loving guide redirects someone away from paths leading toward destruction. And a loving God will sometimes allow temporary heartbreak to protect a soul from permanent damage. You have spent so much time grieving what left your life that you forgot to ask what those endings may have saved you from. And tonight, your spirit is finally becoming ready to see those closed doors differently, not as proof of your unworthiness, but as evidence that I was still guiding your life even when you felt confused and abandoned. I know some wounds still ache. I know certain memories still revisit you late at night. I know there are moments when loneliness makes you miss things that were never truly healthy for your spirit. But hear me carefully tonight. Missing something does not always mean it belonged in your future. Sometimes hearts miss familiarity more than peace. Sometimes people miss emotional attachment even when that attachment slowly wounded them. Sometimes loneliness tempts souls to reopen doors I closed lovingly for their protection. But my child, do not return to places that nearly destroyed your peace simply because healing feels unfamiliar right now. You are entering a new season slowly, a quieter season, a healing season, a season where your spirit will no longer survive solely through fear and emotional exhaustion. And although part of your heart still looks backward occasionally, another part of you is beginning to sense something changing ahead. You feel it during certain quiet moments now. A strange mixture of grief and hope living side by side inside your chest. A sense that maybe life is not ending after all. Maybe it is being redirected. And my child, that feeling is true. Because while you spent months grieving the doors that closed, I was already preparing another door quietly in the distance. One your exhausted heart cannot fully see yet, but it is coming, my child. There were nights when you truly believed I had left you. You never said it out loud exactly like that, but deep inside the feeling was there. You prayed and heard silence. You cried and still felt alone afterward. You begged for peace while anxiety continued tightening around your chest night after night. And slowly, your heart began wondering whether I was still near at all. I know those moments hurt you deeply, especially because you remembered seasons when faith once felt easier. There was a time when hope came naturally to you. A time when prayer felt comforting instead of exhausting. A time when your heart trusted me without constantly fearing disappointment afterward. But pain changed something inside you. After enough heartbreak, enough unanswered questions, enough sleepless nights staring into darkness while thunder echoed outside your window, your spirit became tired. Not rebellious, not evil, just tired. Tired of carrying invisible grief. Tired of overthinking every uncertainty. Tired of pretending to be emotionally okay while quietly breaking underneath the surface. And because your pain lasted longer than expected, part of your heart interpreted the delay as abandonment. But my child, I never left you. Not during the nights you cried yourself to sleep. Not during the panic attacks you hid from everyone else. Not during the moments when loneliness felt so heavy you questioned whether anyone truly cared anymore. I remained beside you through every dark hour, even when your faith became fragile, even when your prayers sounded uncertain, even when exhaustion made your spirit emotionally numb. I stayed. You see, one of the deepest wounds pain creates is the illusion of abandonment. When suffering continues for too long, the human heart starts believing it must face everything alone. That belief slowly changes the way people see themselves, others, and even me. And that is exactly what happened to you. You stopped expecting comfort. You stopped expecting peace. You stopped believing your life could truly become lighter again. Outwardly, you kept functioning. You still answered messages, still went through routines, still smiled when necessary. But inwardly, your spirit felt disconnected. You began moving through life like someone emotionally stranded in the middle of a storm nobody else could fully see. I watched you sitting alone in parked cars after difficult days, staring silently through rain-covered windshields while your thoughts overwhelmed you. I watched you stand in quiet kitchens at midnight with untouched coffee growing cold beside you because anxiety had stolen your appetite again. I watched you lie awake beneath dim streetlight shadows, wondering if your life would ever feel peaceful again. And even then, I was still near, my child. My silence was never proof of absence. Sometimes I remain quiet while healing begins invisibly underneath the surface. Sometimes the soul must walk through deep valleys before it learns how fully it needs my presence again. Sometimes I allow stillness because your spirit is slowly being rebuilt in ways you cannot yet understand. But never mistake stillness for abandonment. A mother sitting quietly beside a grieving child has not abandoned them. A loving hand holding someone through surgery has not forsaken them simply because pain still exists. And I did not forsake you either. Even during your worst nights, I protected parts of your spirit from collapsing completely. That small voice inside you that kept whispering, "Keep going." That was not an accident. That tiny spark of hope surviving beneath all the exhaustion. That was not random. That was my presence remaining with you even when you struggled to feel it clearly. My child, there were moments you survived only because I quietly strengthened you in ways you never fully noticed. You thought you were carrying yourself entirely alone. But there were nights when your heart would have completely given up emotionally if I had not held you together gently behind the scenes. I know your soul still struggles to trust that fully sometimes. Pain taught you to expect distance. Fear taught you to prepare for disappointment. And loneliness convinced you that being emotionally alone was safer than hoping too much again. But tonight your heart is beginning to remember something sacred. You were never abandoned, not by me. Even now, while listening to these words late at night, your spirit recognizes this truth somewhere deep inside. That ache you feel in your chest right now. That mixture of sadness, relief, and longing. It is the sound of your soul beginning to reconnect with hope again. And my child, hope returning after deep pain is a holy thing, because wounded hearts do not trust easily. Exhausted spirits do not soften quickly. People who survived emotional storms often expect darkness even during calm moments. Yet despite everything you endured, your heart is still listening tonight. That matters more than you realize. It means the numbness is not permanent. It means despair did not fully consume your spirit. It means healing is already beginning quietly inside places you thought would remain cold forever. You may not fully feel restored yet. The grief has not disappeared overnight. The anxiety has not completely faded. Certain wounds still ache during quiet moments. But my child, restoration does not begin loudly. It begins gently, like rain touching dry ground after a long drought. Like dawn slowly appearing after endless darkness. Like warmth returning gradually to hands that have been cold for too long. That is what is happening inside your spirit now. Very slowly you are beginning to breathe differently again. Very quietly your soul is learning it no longer has to survive entirely through fear. Very gently your heart is beginning to believe peace may still be possible after all. And there is something else I need you to understand tonight. Healing will not happen all at once. I know part of you wishes the pain would disappear immediately. I know you want the heaviness lifted completely. I know you are tired of carrying emotional exhaustion everywhere you go. But true healing often happens gradually, one layer at a time, one sleepless night at a time, one honest prayer at a time. And my child, whether you realize it yet or not, healing has already begun in places inside you that you stopped checking long ago. My child, I know part of you wants the pain to disappear immediately. You are tired of carrying heaviness into every room. Tired of waking up emotionally exhausted before the day even begins. Tired of nights where your mind refuses to rest while rain taps softly against the windows and loneliness settles quietly beside you again. You want relief. You want peace. You want one morning where your chest no longer feels tight with fear and emotional exhaustion. And my child, I understand that longing deeply. But tonight I need you to hear me carefully. Healing will not happen all at once. I know that truth may disappoint the exhausted part of your spirit that desperately wants instant comfort. But real healing, the kind that reaches deep wounds instead of merely covering them temporarily, often happens slowly. Quietly, patiently, one layer at a time. Just as storms do not arrive in 1 second, deep healing rarely arrives in one moment either. The rain outside does not flood the earth instantly. Dawn does not suddenly appear all at once after midnight. And hearts that carried years of grief cannot always recover overnight simply because they wish to. My child, you have been wounded deeply. There are layers of sadness inside you connected to years of emotional survival. Years of disappointment, years of carrying anxiety silently, years of pretending to be okay while your spirit quietly cried for rest. So be gentle with yourself during this process. You keep expecting yourself to be healed already. You become frustrated when old memories still hurt. You criticize yourself whenever fear returns unexpectedly during quiet nights. But healing is not linear. Some days you will feel stronger. Other days sadness will revisit you without warning. Some mornings hope will feel close. Other nights grief may suddenly sit beside you again, while distant sirens echo through empty streets outside your window. That does not mean you are failing. It means your heart is human, my child. Stop measuring healing only by the absence of pain. Sometimes healing first appears as honesty, the ability to finally admit I am tired, I am hurting, I need help, I cannot carry this alone anymore. For a long time you tried healing through avoidance instead of truth. You distracted yourself, you buried emotions, you forced yourself to move forward before your soul had properly processed the wounds underneath. But buried pain does not disappear simply because you ignore it. It waits quietly beneath the surface until the soul becomes too exhausted to carry it any longer. That is why your emotions sometimes overwhelm you unexpectedly now. That is why certain memories still affect your body physically. That is why random moments of sadness suddenly appear while driving through rainy streets or sitting alone late at night. Your soul is trying to release what it carried silently for too long. And my child, release is part of healing too. I know it scares you sometimes when emotions rise unexpectedly. You fear falling apart completely. You fear becoming consumed by sadness if you stop suppressing it. But hear me carefully tonight. Feeling your pain honestly is not weakness, it is courage. Pretending to be fine while quietly drowning is not strength. True strength is allowing your wounded heart to finally receive compassion instead of constant pressure. You do not need to punish yourself into healing. You do not need to force your spirit to recover faster than it is ready to. Be patient with the parts of yourself still learning how to trust peace again. Your nervous system has lived in fear for a long time. Your mind has survived through overthinking for years. Your heart learned to expect disappointment before joy. Of course, healing feels unfamiliar sometimes. Peace can feel uncomfortable to souls accustomed to chaos. Rest can feel frightening to hearts trained only to survive. But slowly, your spirit is learning something new now. You no longer have to fight every battle alone. That truth is beginning to soften places inside you that once felt permanently cold. You may notice it in small moments first. A slightly calmer breath during stressful nights. A moment of stillness while rain falls outside. A quiet realization that your life may not always feel this heavy forever. These moments matter more than you realize. Healing often begins invisibly before it becomes obvious. A seed beneath the ground appears lifeless before growth finally breaks through the surface. The sky begins changing long before sunrise fully arrives. And wounded hearts often start healing internally before emotions completely catch up to the transformation happening inside. That is what is happening to you now, my child. Even though you still carry pain, your soul is changing slowly. Even though fear still visits you, hope is returning too. Even though grief still lingers, it no longer completely owns your spirit the way it once did. And one day you will look back at this season differently. Not only as the season that broke you emotionally, but also as the season where your soul finally stopped pretending. The season where you became honest. The season where you stopped performing strength and started seeking healing instead. The season where your exhausted heart finally learned it deserved gentleness too. My child, I am not rushing your restoration. I know exactly how fragile certain parts of your spirit still feel. I know which wounds require tenderness instead of pressure. I know how deeply your soul longs for safety after surviving so much emotional exhaustion. And I am walking with you through every step of this healing process. Even during the setbacks, even during the lonely nights, even during the moments when you fear nothing is changing fast enough. You are not healing alone. And tonight there is something else your spirit is finally beginning to realize quietly. You are becoming emotionally honest with yourself for the very first time in a long while. And that honesty is opening a door inside your soul that healing has been waiting to enter. My child, You have spent so much time pretending to be okay that sometimes even you no longer recognize where the performance ends and the real pain begins. You became skilled at hiding your exhaustion, skilled at smiling while your chest felt heavy, skilled at answering "I'm fine" while your spirit quietly begged for rest. And after a while, pretending became automatic. You learned how to laugh during conversations while secretly feeling disconnected inside. You learned how to comfort others while your own heart felt empty. You learned how to continue functioning even during seasons when your soul was barely surviving emotionally. But my child, pretending has exhausted you more than you realize, because carrying pain is already heavy. Carrying pain while acting like it does not exist becomes unbearable. I know why you built this version of yourself. The strong version, the calm version, the version that tells everyone "don't worry about me." You built it because somewhere in your life, vulnerability stopped feeling safe. Perhaps people misunderstood your emotions. Perhaps your pain was minimized. Perhaps you learned that showing weakness only made you feel more alone afterward. So gradually your heart decided, "I will carry this quietly instead." And you did. You carried anxiety quietly. You carried grief quietly. You carried fear quietly. Even your spiritual exhaustion became something you tried to hide from everyone around you. But my child, hiding your pain never healed it. It only isolated you deeper inside yourself. I saw the moments when your smile faded the second you were alone again. I saw the exhaustion that hit your spirit after long days of pretending everything felt normal. I saw you sitting silently in dark rooms after everyone else slept, finally allowing the emotions you suppressed all day to surface again. Those moments were real, more real than the performance. And tonight I need you to hear something clearly. I do not need the performance version of you. I do not need the strong version. I do not need the emotionally polished version. I do not need the carefully controlled version that hides every wound behind forced calmness. I want the real you. The tired you, the anxious you, the grieving you, the version of you that sometimes feels emotionally lost at 3 a.m. while rain taps softly against the windows, and your thoughts become unbearably heavy. That version of you does not scare me. You do not need to impress me with strength. You do not need to pretend your faith never struggles. You do not need to act emotionally healed before healing has actually happened. My child, honesty is holier than performance. And your soul is becoming exhausted from pretending. You feel it now, don't you? There are moments when you suddenly become emotionally numb because carrying the mask requires too much energy. Moments when your body feels physically tired even after rest, because emotional suppression drains the spirit deeply. Moments when loneliness hits unexpectedly because nobody truly knows how much you are actually carrying inside. You fear showing the real pain, because you worry people may leave once they fully see how tired you are. But hear me carefully tonight. The right kind of love is not frightened by honesty, and neither am I. I already know the parts of yourself you try hardest to hide. I know the overthinking, the fear, the regret, the sadness that revisits you during quiet nights. I know how deeply you long to feel emotionally safe again. And I know how difficult it became for you to trust that safety still exists anywhere. That is why your soul built armor, emotional armor, spiritual armor, walls designed to prevent further heartbreak. But armor becomes heavy after years of wearing it constantly. And my child, your soul is tired of carrying it. You miss softness. You miss peace. You miss the version of yourself that once felt emotionally open without fear controlling everything. Even now, while listening to these words, part of your heart feels emotional because something inside you recognizes the truth. You cannot heal while constantly hiding. Healing begins when honesty finally enters the room. Not polished honesty, not acceptable honesty, real honesty. The kind that admits, "I am lonely, I am scared, I am emotionally exhausted, I do not know how to keep pretending everything is okay anymore." My child, those truths do not make you weak. They make you human. For too long, you believed healing meant becoming emotionally unaffected by pain. But healing is not becoming emotionless. Healing is becoming free enough to feel honestly again, without shame controlling your spirit. And tonight, your soul is moving closer to that freedom slowly. You are beginning to realize you no longer want to live only as the version of yourself built entirely around survival. You no longer want fear making every decision. You no longer want emotional exhaustion defining your identity forever. Something inside you wants more now. More peace, more truth, more rest, more authenticity. And my child, that desire is holy, because the real you beneath all the armor is still alive. The gentle part, the hopeful part, the deeply compassionate part, the part capable of feeling joy without guilt and peace without fear. Pain buried those parts for a while, but pain did not destroy them completely. I see them still, even during your darkest nights, even while anxiety still follows you into quiet moments, even while grief still revisits certain memories unexpectedly. The real you is still there beneath all the exhaustion, and slowly, very slowly, your soul is becoming ready to release what it has been carrying for far too long. Because there is something deep inside your heart that you have held tightly for years, my child. And before true restoration fully arrives, that hidden burden must finally be released into the light. My child, something has been changing inside you lately. Quietly, slowly, almost so gently that part of you barely notices it yet, but your soul feels it. The numbness that once completely surrounded your heart is beginning to crack slightly. The endless emotional fog that covered your spirit for so long no longer feels quite as permanent as it once did. And even though fear still lingers, something deeper inside you is starting to wake up again. I know that feeling confuses you sometimes, because after surviving so much emotional exhaustion, part of you became comfortable in numbness. Numbness protected you from feeling too much pain all at once. It helped you continue functioning when your heart became overwhelmed. But numbness also disconnected you from hope, from peace, from joy, from the gentle parts of yourself that still long to feel alive again. And now, your spirit is slowly returning to life. That is why certain moments affect you differently lately. That is why these words reach deeper into your chest than you expected. That is why random waves of emotion suddenly appear while driving alone at night, or sitting quietly in your room while rain falls softly outside the window. Your soul is awakening, not perfectly, not completely, but enough to begin feeling again. And my child, feeling again after long emotional numbness can feel frightening at first, because once the walls around the heart begin softening, hidden pain also starts rising toward the surface. Old grief returns, old memories reappear, old wounds ask to finally be acknowledged honestly instead of buried deeper. That is part of healing too. I know there are nights now when emotions suddenly overwhelm you unexpectedly. Moments when your chest feels heavy for reasons you cannot fully explain logically. Moments when tears appear even though you thought you had already moved on from certain pain. You wonder sometimes, why am I feeling all of this again? Because your soul is no longer surviving through numbness alone. The healing process has begun waking up parts of your spirit that pain tried to shut down completely. And my child, although it feels uncomfortable right now, this awakening is sacred. For a long time, survival mode became your identity. You stopped asking yourself what you truly felt because functioning became more important than honesty. You stopped listening to your deeper emotions because life demanded that you keep moving forward no matter how exhausted you were inside. But now your spirit is finally slowing down enough to hear itself again. That is why silence affects you differently lately. That is why certain songs, certain memories, certain late-night moments suddenly touch places inside your heart that have been asleep for years. Your soul is remembering what it means to feel deeply again. And yes, part of that process hurts, because buried grief does not disappear quietly forever. Eventually it asks to be seen. Eventually it asks to be released. Eventually it asks for healing instead of suppression. That is where you are now, my child. You are standing at the edge of emotional awakening after years of spiritual exhaustion. I know part of you still fears vulnerability. You worry that feeling deeply again may break you completely. You fear reopening wounds that already hurt enough the first time. But hear me carefully tonight. Avoiding pain never truly healed your soul. It only delayed the healing process. The tears you resisted for years are not your enemy. The emotions rising inside you are not signs of failure. The sadness surfacing during quiet nights is not proof you are weak. It is proof your heart is alive. Alive enough to finally stop pretending. Alive enough to admit the truth. Alive enough to desire peace more than emotional numbness. And my child, that is a holy transformation. I see the change happening inside you already. You are beginning to notice patterns you once ignored. You are beginning to recognize what drains your peace. You are beginning to realize how much emotional pain you tolerated simply because loneliness convinced you that survival was enough. But now, your spirit wants more than survival. It wants healing. It wants honesty. It wants rest. It wants love that feels safe instead of emotionally exhausting. And although the journey ahead still contains difficult moments, your soul is finally awake enough to walk toward restoration instead of endlessly running from pain. That is why this season feels different. Not easier yet, but different. Something inside you no longer wants to remain trapped in darkness forever. Something inside you is growing tired of fear controlling every thought. Something inside you is beginning to believe peace may actually be possible again someday. My child, that small belief matters more than you realize, because hope returning after emotional numbness is the beginning of rebirth. The enemy wanted your heart completely cold, wanted your spirit permanently hopeless, wanted your pain to convince you that healing was impossible. But tonight your soul is proving otherwise. Even through tears, even through fear, even through uncertainty, you are still reaching toward light, and that reaching is sacred. You may not fully understand where this healing journey is leading yet. You may still feel emotionally fragile some nights while distant thunder rolls outside and old memories revisit your thoughts unexpectedly. But something inside you has already changed permanently. You no longer want to remain asleep emotionally. You no longer want to live disconnected from your own heart. And my child, there is one final step your soul must soon face before deeper peace fully arrives. Forgiveness. Not easy forgiveness, not shallow forgiveness, but the painful kind that finally releases chains your spirit has carried for far too long. And when that moment comes, it will hurt before it heals. My child, there is still a chain wrapped quietly around your spirit tonight. Not a visible chain, not one others can easily see, but your soul feels its weight every day. It appears during sleepless nights when old memories revisit your mind without warning. It appears when certain names, certain places, or certain moments suddenly tighten something deep inside your chest again. It appears when anger, sadness, regret, or grief rise unexpectedly while rain taps softly against your window and the silence around you feels unbearably heavy. My child, the chain is unforgiveness, and I know why you resist releasing it. Because part of your heart still aches deeply from what happened. Part of you still carries unanswered pain. Part of you still remembers how unfair certain moments felt. You were wounded, disappointed, abandoned, misunderstood. Some people hurt you while never fully understanding the damage they caused afterward. Some left emotional scars your spirit still carries quietly years later. Some words spoken over your life still echo painfully in your mind during lonely nights. And because the wounds were real, forgiveness feels impossible sometimes. I know that. I know how your heart argues silently. If I forgive, it means the pain did not matter. If I let go, it means what happened was acceptable. If I release this anger, who will protect me from being hurt again? But my child, forgiveness is not pretending the wound never existed. Forgiveness is releasing yourself from endlessly bleeding through the same pain. You see, unforgiveness does something dangerous to the human spirit. At first, it feels protective. It convinces wounded hearts that holding on to anger keeps them safe from future pain. But over time, the anger begins poisoning the soul carrying it. That is why your chest still feels heavy sometimes, even during peaceful moments. That is why old memories still trigger emotional exhaustion inside you unexpectedly. That is why your spirit still feels trapped between healing and grief. Part of your soul wants peace, but another part still clings tightly to old pain, because letting go feels frightening. My child, I am not asking you to deny what hurt you. I saw the tears. I saw the betrayal. I saw the loneliness that followed afterward. I saw the nights when grief sat beside you while thunder rolled softly outside and you wondered if your heart would ever feel safe again. The wounds were real, but carrying them forever is slowly exhausting your spirit. You do not realize how much emotional energy unforgiveness has stolen from you over the years. It has followed you into relationships, into quiet nights, into your prayers, into the way you now see yourself and others. It taught your heart to expect disappointment before love. It taught your spirit to build walls before connection. It taught your mind to stay emotionally alert all the time because pain once arrived without warning. And now your soul is tired. Tired of carrying bitterness, tired of replaying old wounds, tired of feeling emotionally chained to moments that already ended long ago. My child, forgiveness is not weakness. Sometimes forgiveness is the bravest thing a wounded heart can choose, because forgiveness means trusting me with justice instead of carrying the burden alone forever. Forgiveness means choosing peace over endless emotional warfare. Forgiveness means refusing to let old pain control your future any longer. I know part of you still fears becoming vulnerable again afterward. You fear being hurt another time. You fear softening your heart only to experience disappointment again. But hear me carefully tonight. Forgiveness does not require you to return to unhealthy places. It does not require you to ignore wisdom. It does not require you to reopen doors I lovingly closed for your protection. Some distances remain necessary. Some boundaries remain healthy. But bitterness cannot continue living inside your spirit without slowly darkening your peace too. And my child, you deserve peace. Real peace. Not emotional numbness pretending to be peace. Not avoidance pretending to be healing. True peace. The kind that allows your chest to finally breathe without carrying old storms constantly inside it. That peace begins the moment your soul decides it no longer wants to remain chained to the past forever. I know forgiveness still feels painful tonight. I know your wounds still ache in certain quiet moments. I know there are memories your heart wishes had never happened, but your future healing cannot fully bloom while your spirit remains trapped inside yesterday's pain. You are being called forward now, forward toward healing, forward toward softness again, forward toward emotional freedom after years of carrying hidden heaviness alone. And my child, your soul already knows this deep down. That is why bitterness no longer feels satisfying. That is why revenge fantasies eventually leave emptiness afterward. That is why old anger now exhausts you more than it empowers you. Your spirit is groaning beyond survival mode, the version of you being reborn through this healing journey. No longer wants darkness controlling your heart. You are beginning to desire peace more than punishment, rest more than resentment, healing more than emotional warfare. That transformation is sacred because wounded hearts often become trapped inside cycles of pain for years. But your soul is beginning to realize something important now. You cannot heal while continuing to drink from the same bitterness that wounded you. And tonight, while the rain falls softly outside and the silence wraps around the room once again, your spirit is standing at an important crossroads. One path keeps carrying old chains forever. The other path hurts for a while, but eventually leads toward freedom. My child, choose freedom. Choose the kind of healing that finally allows your heart to rest again. Choose the kind of peace that no longer requires emotional armor every waking moment. Choose the future waiting beyond this season of grief. Because there is something I must warn you about gently tonight. The darkness you escaped from once will try to call your wounded heart backward again. Do not return to it. My child, for so long you have been searching everywhere for peace. You searched through distractions, through relationships, through endless thinking, through trying to control every possible outcome before tomorrow even arrived. You searched for peace in late-night scrolling while your room sat dark and silent around you. You searched for it in temporary comforts that only numbed the ache for a little while before the heaviness returned again. You searched for it in people, hoping someone else could finally quiet the loneliness living inside your chest. But even after all that searching, your spirit still felt restless, because the peace your soul truly longs for cannot be built on fear. And fear has been quietly guiding your life for a very long time now. Fear of abandonment, fear of disappointment, fear of being hurt again. Fear that your future may carry the same exhaustion your past already did. So you kept trying to protect yourself. You overthought everything, prepared for worst-case scenarios constantly, held tightly to situations that drained you because uncertainty felt even more frightening. And slowly, your soul became exhausted from carrying control everywhere. My child, true peace was never meant to come from controlling life perfectly. True peace comes from surrender, not surrendering your worth, not surrendering your voice, surrendering the impossible burden of trying to carry everything alone. You were never designed to hold the weight of the entire future inside your mind every night. You were never created to survive solely through anxiety and emotional self-protection. Yet that is what your spirit has been trying to do. I know the nights when your thoughts spiraled endlessly while rain tapped softly against the windows and the silence around you became unbearably heavy. I know the mornings when your chest already felt tense before the day even started. I know how tired your soul became from constantly expecting disaster before peace had the chance to fully arrive. And my child, your spirit is finally becoming too weary to keep living that way. That exhaustion is not failure. It is your soul recognizing that fear cannot sustain you forever. You have spent years trying to hold yourself together through overthinking, emotional armor, and constant alertness. But none of those things ever truly brought rest to your heart, because peace cannot grow where fear controls everything. That is why even calm moments sometimes made you uncomfortable. That is why silence occasionally frightened you instead of comforting you. That is why your mind kept preparing for pain even during moments that should have felt safe. Your nervous system became trained for survival instead of rest. But my child, I am leading you towards something different now. Toward stillness, toward softness, toward the kind of peace that does not depend on circumstances being perfect first. I know part of you still struggles to trust that peace is possible. Pain trained your heart to expect disappointment. Loneliness trained your spirit to remain emotionally guarded. And anxiety taught your mind that safety only exists through constant control. But tonight I need you to hear me carefully. Control has been exhausting your soul, not because you are weak, but because human hearts were never meant to carry that much pressure constantly. You cannot predict every heartbreak before it arrives. You cannot protect yourself from every painful possibility forever. You cannot heal while remaining emotionally tense every waking moment. At some point, your soul must finally exhale. And my child, that moment is beginning now. You feel it, don't you? A strange tiredness toward chaos. A growing desire for simplicity. A quiet longing to stop fighting yourself every day. That longing is sacred, because it means your spirit is beginning to choose peace over survival mode. You no longer want endless emotional warfare inside your mind. You no longer want fear controlling your decisions completely. You no longer want to keep reopening wounds that healing is trying to close gently. Your soul wants rest now. Real rest. Not distraction, not temporary escape. Peace. Deep enough to reach your thoughts, your breathing, your nervous system, your exhausted heart. And my child, that peace begins when you stop carrying burdens I never asked you to hold alone. You do not need to solve your entire future tonight. You do not need to have every answer immediately. You do not need to punish yourself every time uncertainty appears. Sometimes healing begins simply by allowing your soul to unclench, by finally admitting I cannot control everything, and maybe I do not need to. That realization frightens you slightly because your heart spent years believing constant control was the only thing keeping you safe. But look at what carrying all that fear has done to your spirit. The sleepless nights, the overthinking, the emotional exhaustion, the anxiety that followed you into peaceful moments. My child, your soul is hungry for something gentler now. And tonight, while distant rain falls softly beyond your window, And these words settle quietly into your spirit. Something important is already beginning inside you. You are learning how to surrender without feeling abandoned. That is what true peace requires. Not certainty about every outcome, not a life completely free from pain, but trust deep enough to believe you are still held even during uncertainty. And slowly, very slowly, your heart is beginning to believe that again. You are beginning to breathe differently, think differently, feel differently. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough for healing to continue unfolding inside you quietly. Because whether you fully recognize it yet or not, restoration has already started happening behind the scenes of your life. Small changes, invisible shifts, quiet healing inside places you thought would remain broken forever. And my child, something beautiful is beginning to rebuild your spirit from the inside out. My child, something is quietly changing inside your life right now, even if you cannot fully see it yet. I know there are still nights when fear visits you. Still moments when loneliness suddenly rises in your chest without warning. Still mornings when exhaustion lingers heavily on your spirit before the day even begins. But beneath all of that, something deeper is shifting. You are not the same person you were at the beginning of this pain. I know sometimes you only notice the scars, the tiredness, the emotional weight you still carry, but I see something else too. I see the wisdom your suffering created. I see the compassion growing inside you. I see how deeply your spirit now values peace after spending so long trapped in emotional chaos. My child, healing has already begun changing the way your soul responds to life. There are things you once tolerated that now drain you quickly. Conversations that once felt normal now leave your spirit feeling unsettled. Environments that once distracted you no longer satisfy the deeper hunger inside your heart anymore. That is not weakness, that is awakening. Your soul is becoming more honest about what it truly needs now. You no longer crave noise the way you once did. You no longer want to survive through numbness alone. You no longer want relationships, habits, or environments that constantly leave your spirit exhausted afterward. You are beginning to desire peace more than distraction. And my child, that change matters deeply. Because for a long time, your life revolved around survival. You woke up emotionally tense, moved through the day emotionally guarded, fell asleep emotionally exhausted, and during all of it, you barely had space to ask yourself what your soul truly needed. But now, the healing process is slowing you down enough to hear your spirit again. You notice it during quiet nights, during long drives through rain-covered streets, during moments when the world around you becomes silent enough for truth to rise gently inside your heart. Something in you no longer wants to live disconnected from peace. That realization is sacred, because many wounded people remain trapped in survival mode for years, without ever allowing their hearts to imagine something better. But your spirit is beginning to hope again slowly. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly. Like the first soft light before sunrise after endless darkness. You may still feel emotionally fragile some days. Certain memories still hurt. Certain fears still revisit your thoughts late at night. But even now, there are signs of healing already unfolding inside you. You recover from emotional storms faster than before. You recognize unhealthy patterns more clearly now. You notice when your peace begins disappearing instead of ignoring it completely. That awareness is growth, and my child, I need you to stop overlooking your progress simply because healing has not happened perfectly yet. The fact that you still feel deeply after everything you survived is remarkable. The fact that your heart still longs for goodness after disappointment wounded you repeatedly is holy. The fact that you are still listening tonight instead of completely giving up emotionally proves your spirit is stronger than you realize. You keep focusing on how far you still need to go, but look how far you already came. There were nights you thought you would never emotionally survive. Nights when grief felt endless. Nights when loneliness sat so heavily on your chest that even breathing felt exhausting. Yet somehow you are still here, still healing, still hoping, still searching for light despite all the darkness you walked through. My child, I have been rebuilding you quietly from the inside out this entire time. Not through sudden perfection, not through instant transformation, But through small sacred shifts, your spirit is only now beginning to notice. You are becoming softer without becoming weak, wiser without becoming cold, more emotionally honest without drowning in shame. That transformation matters more than outward appearances. The world often measures healing by visible success, but I measure healing by peace returning slowly to wounded hearts. And your peace is returning, little by little. You feel it during certain quiet moments now. Moments when your breathing softens unexpectedly. Moments when your thoughts become calm for a little while instead of racing endlessly. Moments when your soul suddenly realizes it no longer wants to return to the emotional darkness it once accepted as normal. Those moments are not accidents. They are signs that restoration is already unfolding beneath the surface. Even now, while listening to these words late at night, your spirit feels different than it did months ago. Still wounded in some places, yes. Still healing, yes. But no longer completely hopeless. That matters deeply, my child. Because hopelessness once controlled your life. It convinced you nothing would ever change. It told you peace belonged to other people, not to you. But tonight your soul no longer fully believes that lie anymore. Something inside you is beginning to expect healing instead of endless destruction. Beginning to expect peace instead of permanent chaos. Beginning to trust that maybe your future does not have to mirror your past forever. And my child, you are right to hope again, because your life is changing quietly. Even when the changes feel invisible, even when progress feels slow, even when fear still visits you occasionally during sleepless nights, I am rebuilding what pain tried to destroy. And there is still one final hidden wound inside your heart that must come fully into the light before deeper restoration arrives completely. A wound so deeply buried that even you rarely speak about it honestly. But my child does. I already know exactly where it is. My child. There is a wound inside you that you rarely speak about honestly. Not because it no longer hurts, but because the pain became so deep that words stopped feeling large enough to explain it properly. So instead, you carried it silently. You buried it beneath routines, beneath distractions, beneath forced smiles and I'm okay responses that nobody questioned deeply enough. But the wound never fully disappeared. It still visits you during quiet nights. It still rises unexpectedly while driving through rain-covered streets beneath dim streetlights. It still tightens your chest when certain memories return without warning at 2 a.m. while the world around you sleeps peacefully. My child, the wound is this. Deep inside, part of you still feels unwanted. Not always consciously, not always loudly, but quietly. Like a hidden ache living underneath your relationships, your fears, your anxiety, and your overthinking. Somewhere along your journey, pain convinced your heart that you were not fully chosen, not fully seen, not fully safe, not fully enough. And because that wound remained unhealed for so long, it shaped the way you began living. You started overthinking small changes in people's behavior. You became afraid of emotional distance. You prepared yourself mentally for abandonment before anyone even left. And slowly, you began measuring your worth through how others treated you. If someone stayed, you felt temporarily valuable. If someone withdrew, your heart immediately questioned its worth again. If love became inconsistent, your anxiety grew stronger because the wound underneath was already whispering, "You are not truly wanted." My child, I know how deeply this wound affected you. I saw the nights when rejection replayed in your mind long after conversations ended. I saw the moments when silence from others triggered fear far greater than the situation itself. I saw how emotionally exhausting it became, constantly questioning whether you mattered deeply enough to be loved fully. And because of that fear, you often abandoned yourself before others even had the chance to. You settled for less than your soul deserved. You tolerated emotional inconsistency because loneliness frightened you more than pain sometimes. You accepted crumbs of affection while secretly starving for real safety and peace. But hear me carefully tonight, my child. Your worth was never dependent on who stayed or who walked away. People leaving your life did not erase your value. Rejection did not redefine your soul. Disappointment did not make you less worthy of love, gentleness, or belonging. Yet the wound inside you still struggles to believe that fully, because wounded hearts often confuse abandonment with identity. When enough painful endings happen, the soul begins asking dangerous questions. What is wrong with me? Why am I never enough? Why do people always leave? My child, those questions were born from pain, not truth. There was never something fundamentally broken about your soul. You were simply hurt by people who themselves carried confusion, inconsistency, emotional wounds, or limitations they never healed properly. And instead of recognizing their brokenness clearly, your heart absorbed the blame onto itself. That is why your spirit became so hard on itself. That is why you criticize your emotions constantly. That is why your mind overthinks every possible rejection before it even happens. The wound taught your heart to expect abandonment everywhere, even in peaceful moments. That is why closeness sometimes scares you now. That is why vulnerability feels dangerous. That is why part of you still struggles to trust that love can remain gentle instead of eventually becoming painful. My child, your soul has been exhausted from carrying this fear quietly for years. But tonight I need you to understand something sacred. You were wanted before anyone on earth ever chose you. I chose you, not because you were perfect, not because you always handled pain correctly, not because your faith never struggled. I chose you simply because you are mine, and my love does not fluctuate based on your emotional strength. It does not disappear during your weakest nights. It does not grow distant because you feel anxious, exhausted, or wounded. I loved you during the sleepless nights, during the emotional breakdowns, during the moments you questioned your worth completely. My child, you have never been unwanted by me. Never. Even when loneliness wrapped around your spirit like cold air during rainy nights. Even when your heart felt invisible to the world around you. Even when you sat silently in dark rooms wondering whether your existence mattered deeply to anyone anymore. I still saw you completely. And tonight your soul is finally beginning to realize something important. The love you have been searching for desperately in unstable places was never meant to replace the security only my presence can give your spirit. Human love may disappoint sometimes. People may leave. Situations may change unexpectedly. But my love for you does not shift with circumstances. That truth is beginning to heal the deepest wound inside you now, slowly, gently, patiently. Like warm light entering a room that remained dark for far too long. You may still struggle with fear sometimes. You may still overthink occasionally during quiet nights. You may still feel emotionally fragile while healing continues. But the lie that you are unwanted is losing power over your spirit now. And my child, that changes everything. Because once the soul finally believes it is deeply loved, it stops begging the world for proof of its worth constantly. It stops chasing peace in unhealthy places. It stops accepting emotional crumbs out of fear of loneliness. It stops measuring value through temporary approval, and instead it begins resting. Resting in truth, resting in safety, resting in love that does not disappear every time weakness appears. That is where your healing is leading you now, toward rest, toward peace, toward freedom from the fear that you were never enough. And my child, once your soul fully accepts that truth, the future waiting ahead of you will no longer feel so frightening anymore. My child, I know the future still frightens you sometimes. You do not always say it aloud. But I hear the fear hidden beneath your overthinking during sleepless nights. I hear the quiet panic inside your chest whenever life feels uncertain again. I hear the questions your heart whispers while staring through rain-covered windows at midnight, wondering what will happen next. What if things never truly get better? What if I carry this heaviness forever? What if peace never fully reaches my life? My child, your fear comes from pain that lasted longer than expected. After surviving emotional exhaustion for so long, your spirit became cautious about hope. You learned not to trust peaceful moments too quickly because disappointment had visited you before without warning. You became emotionally alert all the time, preparing yourself for future heartbreak before it even arrived. And now when you look ahead, Part of you still expects darkness. But tonight I need you to understand something deeply important. You cannot clearly see the future while standing inside the middle of healing. Wounded hearts often mistake temporary pain for permanent destiny. Exhausted souls often assume tomorrow will feel exactly like today forever. But my child, seasons change even when the night feels endless. The rain outside eventually stops, dawn eventually rises, and hearts carrying deep grief eventually begin breathing differently again. That is already beginning inside you now. You may not fully recognize it yet because healing feels gradual instead of dramatic. But your spirit is changing quietly beneath the surface. You are no longer the person who completely surrendered to hopelessness. You are no longer emotionally asleep the way you once were. You are no longer fully trapped inside survival mode without awareness of your deeper wounds. Something inside you has awakened, and because of that awakening, your future is changing too. I know you still fear loneliness sometimes. You fear repeating painful cycles. You fear giving your heart to things that may wound you again. But hear me carefully tonight. The healed version of you will not choose life the same way the wounded version did. That matters more than you realize. Pain once convinced you to accept emotional crumbs because you feared abandonment. Fear once convinced you to tolerate environments that slowly drained your spirit. Loneliness once convinced you to cling tightly to things that were never truly healthy for your peace. But healing changes what the soul is willing to accept, and your soul is changing now. You are beginning to recognize red flags faster. You are beginning to notice when peace quietly disappears around certain people or situations. You are beginning to understand that exhaustion is not the same thing as love. That wisdom will protect your future differently, my child. I know you sometimes look ahead and see only uncertainty. You wonder where your life is going. You wonder whether joy will ever feel natural again instead of temporary. You wonder whether the heaviness inside your chest will ever fully disappear. And because the answers do not arrive immediately, fear tries to write the story for you. But fear is not the author of your future. I am. And what I am building inside your life right now cannot fully be understood from where you currently stay. You only see fragments, moments, painful transitions, closed doors, lonely nights. But I see the entire picture. I see the future version of you breathing more peacefully, sleeping more deeply, laughing without hidden heaviness underneath every smile, trusting again without constant fear destroying every moment of closeness. I see your spirit becoming softer without becoming weak. I see your heart learning how to feel safe again. I see your life becoming quieter in the places that once felt chaotic constantly. That future already exists ahead of you, my child. Even if your exhausted mind struggles to imagine it tonight, the problem is that fear keeps showing you only the worst possibilities. Fear tells you healing will fail. Fear tells you loneliness will remain forever. Fear tells you peace belongs to other people but not to you. But fear has lied to you before. It lied when it told you that darkness would completely destroy your spirit. It lied when it told you nobody cared anymore. It lied when it convinced you your soul was too broken to recover. And now it lies again about your future. My child, the future ahead of you is not empty. There are still peaceful mornings waiting for you. Still sacred conversations waiting for you. Still moments where your heart will suddenly realize it no longer feels as heavy as it once did. There are still nights ahead where rain will fall softly outside your window. Yet your chest will no longer feel crushed by loneliness the same way it once did. There are still moments of healing your spirit has not experienced yet. Still joy your heart cannot currently imagine. Still peace unfolding quietly beyond this painful chapter. That is why I keep asking you to stay. Stay through the uncertainty. Stay through the healing process. Stay through the nights when fear revisits your thoughts again. Because your story is not ending in this darkness. You are walking through transition, not abandonment. Through restoration, not destruction. Through awakening, not defeat. And even though the future still feels blurry sometimes, Your soul already senses something important changing quietly ahead. Hope no longer feels impossible the way it once did. Fragile, yes. Tender, yes. But alive again. And my child, that small returning hope is the first glimpse of the future I have been preparing for you all along. A future where your spirit no longer survives only through fear. A future where peace becomes more familiar than panic. A future where your heart finally understands what it means to rest again. And that future is closer than you think tonight. My child, tonight feels different, doesn't it? Not because every problem suddenly disappeared. Not because all your questions were instantly answered, but because something inside your spirit no longer feels completely trapped in darkness the way it once did. For the first time in a long while, your soul is breathing differently. I know the pain has not vanished overnight. Certain memories still ache. Certain fears still revisit your thoughts during quiet moments. There are still nights when rain falls softly against the window and loneliness tries to settle beside you again. But tonight, something deeper than fear is beginning to rise inside your heart. Peace. Small right now. Fragile perhaps, but real. And my child, that peace did not arrive by accident. It arrived because your soul finally stopped running from truth. For so long you survived through emotional armor, through numbness, through overthinking, through pretending to be stronger than you actually felt inside. But somewhere during this long, painful season, your spirit became exhausted from carrying fear constantly. Exhausted from trying to control every outcome. Exhausted from hiding wounds that desperately needed healing instead of silence. And tonight, something finally shifted. You are beginning to understand that healing is not weakness. Rest is not failure. And softness is not something to be ashamed of. That realization changes everything, because wounded hearts often spend years believing survival is strength. But survival alone is not the life I created for you. I created your soul for peace too, not a perfect life free from all pain, but a life no longer controlled entirely by fear, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion. And my child, that restoration has already begun. You may not see all of it yet. Some changes are still happening invisibly beneath the surface. But your spirit knows. That is why these words feel so personal tonight. That is why your chest feels emotional while listening in the quiet darkness. That is why part of your heart suddenly feels both grief and relief at the same time. Your soul recognizes that this season is ending slowly. Not instantly, not dramatically, but truly. The version of you built entirely around survival is beginning to fade. And although part of you still fears what comes next, another part of you is finally becoming ready to live differently, ready to rest, ready to trust again carefully. Ready to stop punishing yourself for being human, ready to stop carrying emotional chains that no longer belong in your future. My child, look at how far you have already come. There were nights when you believed the darkness would swallow your spirit completely. Nights when anxiety tightened around your chest so heavily you feared peace would never return. Nights when loneliness felt louder than every hopeful thought combined. Yet somehow you are still here, still listening, still healing. Still reaching toward light even after everything tried to convince you to stop hoping. That matters deeply, because hopeless souls do not keep searching for healing. Completely broken spirits do not still long for peace. But you do, even now, and that longing is proof that your soul never fully surrendered to darkness after all. My child, I know there are still moments when fear whispers old lies to you. Lies that say you will never truly change. Lies that say your future will always mirror your past. Lies that say healing is temporary and pain will eventually return stronger than before. But tonight I need you to stop listening to those voices, because the person you are becoming now is not the same person fear controlled before. You have learned too much, felt too deeply, awakened too honestly. Your spirit sees differently now. You recognize what drains your peace faster. You understand the importance of rest now. You finally realize your worth does not disappear every time someone misunderstands your heart. And slowly, you are beginning to believe that you deserve gentleness too. That realization is holy, my child, because for so long you gave compassion to everyone except yourself. You comforted others while criticizing your own wounds constantly. You carried impossible emotional expectations while your spirit quietly begged for mercy. But tonight, mercy is entering the room. Not shallow comfort, not temporary distraction. Real mercy. The kind that allows exhausted souls to finally exhale after years of carrying invisible heaviness alone. And my child, you do not have to return to the darkness that almost destroyed your peace before. You do not have to reopen old wounds. You do not have to keep surviving through fear forever. You do not have to keep proving your worth by suffering silently. You are allowed to heal now, allowed to rest, allowed to breathe deeply again. Allowed to believe your future may carry more peace than pain. That permission alone is already softening your spirit tonight. You feel it now, don't you? The quiet stillness settling slowly beneath your racing thoughts. The strange warmth rising gently inside your chest after so much emotional coldness. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, your life is finally turning toward healing instead of endless exhaustion. My child, trust that feeling, because I have been leading you toward this moment for a very long time. The sleepless nights did not destroy you completely. The grief did not erase your soul. The loneliness did not permanently silence hope. Instead, through all the pain, your spirit became more awake, more compassionate, more honest, and more capable of receiving real peace than ever before. And tonight, before this chapter finally closes, there is one last truth your heart must fully understand. You survived for a reason, not merely to carry pain forever, but to become living proof that even deeply wounded souls can rise again into light. My child, if you are still here listening tonight, then I need you to understand something with your whole heart. You survived for a reason, not by accident, not randomly. There were nights when the darkness around you felt unbearable. Nights when emotional exhaustion wrapped around your spirit so heavily that even breathing felt difficult. Nights when loneliness sat beside you in silent rooms while rain tapped softly against the windows and your thoughts became louder than the world outside. And during those nights, you almost gave up emotionally. I know you did. There were moments when hope felt impossible. Moments when fear convinced you nothing would ever truly change. Moments when your soul became so tired that continuing forward felt heavier than stopping altogether. But my child, you kept going anyway. Even while wounded, even while grieving, even while carrying anxiety nobody else fully understood. You survived heartbreak. You survived loneliness. You survived disappointment that nearly convinced your spirit to stop believing in peace completely. And now, standing here after all those painful seasons, your soul still asks quietly, why? Why did you survive? Why did your spirit continue breathing through nights that felt impossible? Why did hope remain alive somewhere deep inside you even after so much pain tried to bury it completely? Because your story was never meant to end in darkness. The enemy wanted your exhaustion to destroy you emotionally, wanted your loneliness to convince you that your life no longer mattered, wanted your fear to become stronger than your faith. But my child, your soul was created for more than survival. You were not meant to spend your entire life trapped inside fear, overthinking, emotional numbness, and hidden grief. You were not created merely to endure pain endlessly without peace ever reaching your heart. There is purpose still alive inside you. Even now, especially now, the compassion groaning inside you because of suffering has purpose. The wisdom born through heartbreak has purpose. The gentleness returning slowly to your spirit after years of emotional exhaustion has purpose. Nothing you survived was meaningless. I know there are still moments when you feel fragile. Still nights when sadness revisits your chest unexpectedly. Still mornings when anxiety whispers old fears into your thoughts again. But my child, you are no longer the same person who entered this storm. Pain changed you, yes, but it did not destroy you completely. Instead, somewhere beneath all the grief and sleepless nights, your soul awakened. You became more honest, more compassionate, more spiritually aware, more understanding of how deeply human hearts need gentleness instead of judgment. And now, The very wounds that once nearly broke you are becoming places where healing can flow outward through your life instead. That is redemption, not pretending the pain never happened, not becoming emotionless afterward, but allowing suffering to transform your spirit instead of permanently hardening it. And my child, that transformation is already happening inside you now. Look at yourself honestly tonight. You still care deeply despite disappointment. You still long for peace despite anxiety. You still search for light despite walking through dark seasons that should have completely destroyed your hope. That means something sacred survived inside you through all of it. The world tried to convince you to become cold. Fear tried to convince you to stop trusting. Loneliness tried to convince you that nobody truly cared whether your spirit healed or not. But here you are, still listening, still healing, still hoping quietly in ways even you do not fully understand sometimes. My child, that quiet hope inside you is not weakness. It is proof that I never stopped breathing life into your spirit even during your darkest nights. There were moments when you thought you were carrying yourself entirely alone. But I was beside you every step. I was there during the panic hidden behind your silence. There during the nights you cried into pillows while trying not to make noise. There during the drives through wet streets while grief sat heavily inside your chest. And even when you questioned whether I remained near, I never abandoned you. Not once. That is why tonight matters. Because tonight your soul finally understands something it could not fully see before. You are not merely surviving anymore. You are healing. Slowly, quietly, patiently. Like dawn slowly rising after the longest storm imaginable. You may still carry scars for a while. Some wounds may continue healing gradually over time. Certain fears may still revisit your thoughts occasionally during lonely nights, but the darkness no longer owns your future, and that changes everything. My child, one day you will look back at this season differently, not only as the season that wounded you deeply, but also as the season where your spirit finally woke up, the season where you stopped pretending, the season where your soul became honest enough to receive healing, the season where you finally realized your worth was never dependent on who stayed, who left, or how perfectly you carried pain. And one day you will breathe without this heaviness constantly sitting on your chest. You will sleep without fear controlling every thought. You will laugh without hidden sorrow underneath every smile. Peace will no longer feel unfamiliar to your spirit, because I am restoring what exhaustion tried to steal from you. Your softness, your hope, your ability to trust again carefully, your belief that your future can still contain beauty after all the grief. And tonight, my child, before these words finally grow quiet, I need you to hear me one last time. Do not return to hopelessness. Do not let fear convince you this healing is imaginary. Do not reopen doors I closed lovingly for your protection. Do not abandon yourself again, simply because the journey still feels slow sometimes. You have already come too far. The rain will not last forever. The sleepless nights will not define your entire story forever. And the loneliness that once wrapped around your spirit like darkness is already beginning to loosen its grip slowly. Because you survived for a reason, and that reason is that your life still carries light the darkness could never fully extinguish. Sometimes the hardest lesson in life is not about becoming stronger, but about learning how to stop carrying everything alone. There are moments when you try to hold it all together, your pain, your fears, your responsibilities, your silent battles while smiling on the outside so no one notices how tired you truly are inside. But slowly that kind of strength begins to turn into exhaustion. Life has a quiet way of teaching us that we were never meant to survive everything in isolation. It is okay to admit that you are tired. It is okay to say that your heart feels heavy. It is okay to pause and breathe without feeling like you are falling behind. Real strength is not pretending you are okay when you are not. Real strength is being honest enough to ask for help, to release what you cannot control and to trust that healing does not happen overnight. You are not weak for feeling deeply. You are human. And sometimes the most powerful turning point in your life begins the moment you stop fighting yourself and start allowing grace to enter your story. If this message touched your heart in any way, leave a comment and share what you are going through or where you are watching from. You are not alone in this journey. And if you want more messages like this, gentle reminders, emotional healing, and spiritual encouragement, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and stay connected.